Oh, why isn't it switching over? Okay, gotta do it manually. Hey everybody, gonna get started here. Things didn't switch over, but it's okay. Hey everybody, welcome again to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics Podcast. I am your host and the moderator of the podcast, bringing you the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide, Cypher here. And today we have a lot of news to cover, and we're going to get into it shortly. But before we get into the news, a few announcements. So first up, we like to welcome everybody to the show. Greatly appreciate you all being here, because without you, we would be just a couple of people shouting into the void that is the internet. So if you like what you are going to hear, or you like us and haven't done so yet, go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We also do other shows other than the News Roundup, which happen every Thursday, roughly at about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those shows include Cypher State, which is a weekly foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that we tackle a issue going on in the geopolitical space with people from across the political spectrum and different kind of analysis points. And so you can check that out every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel. And our good friend Tiberius D, shout out to him, he joins us on that very often. At the end of each month, we will do a news roundup for Cypher State, as well like we do this weekly news roundup for U.S. politics, for global politics. So be sure to check that out as well. We also are now adding shorts to multiple platforms, but we're adding them to YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find those at Crowdsourced Politics on any of those platforms. And shorts are not just little snippets from these pieces, but things that I like to think about and that don't really require a full episode to convey. We usually do a couple of videos during the week of where I'm walking my dogs. So if you want to see my dogs, check out those shorts as well. And we also do a sporadic other podcast called Praxis Run, where we interview a person that has put their theory into action, otherwise known as praxis, with the goal of understanding what motivates people and how to successfully put theory into action. Hence, Praxis Run. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the news roundup. Okay, I think my macros are not working properly, so I have to fix those. But let's go ahead and get into it. First, we're going to begin, as we have always done, with the war in Ukraine. This is day 332 rather, of the invasion. These are a compilation of reports coming from both The Guardian and Reuters. First up, Russia's missiles have pounded more than 40 Ukrainian cities and towns over the past 24 hours. NATO allies met today in Brussels to unveil plans to jointly beef up Europe's air defenses with Patriot and other missile systems. Quote, "We are living in threatening, dangerous times," said German Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht. In a signing ceremony, Germany and more than a dozen other European NATO members committed to jointly procuring weapons for a European sky shield to better protect their territory. After retreating to around 20 kilometers in the north of the Kherson sector in early October, Russian forces appear to be attempting to consolidate a new front line west from the village of Milov. According to the latest UK Ministry of Defence report, heavy fighting continues along this line, especially at the western edge. Ukraine's army boasted of territory gains near the strategically vital southern city of Kherson on Wednesday. 5 settlements in the Beryslavs district in northeast of the Kherson region were said to have been taken from Russian forces over the day. The UK defense minister said that Russia will run out of weapons before Ukraine does, because Russia is isolated and cut off from the global supply chain. Ben Wallace was asked by Sky News in an interview shared today if, quote, there is a risk that Western allies are going to run out of weapons to support Ukraine first, compared to Russia. Wallace said there was not. Russia's ability to make and repair weapons and ammunition is tied up in a global supply chain that it has little current access to, he said. Quote, they need a supply chain, and large parts of their supply chain were not in Russia. They came from all over the world, including Europe, and including Ukraine, he said. Continuing on, Russian soldiers are also resigning in mass, according to the governor of Luhansk Oblast and Sergei Haidai regions. Haidai said on his Telegram, let me reread that. Russian soldiers are resigning in mass, according to the governor of Luhansk Oblast, Sergei Haidai. Haidai said on his Telegram channel that many Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine are writing letters of resignation and prematurely terminating their contracts. Quote, half of the 200 military personnel serving in the 3rd Guard Special Operations Brigade have submitted letters of resignation or prematurely terminated their contracts after taking part in the war against Ukraine, he wrote. The governor noted that though first-timers or Russian soldiers recently conscripted as part of Putin's mobilization decree are ready to go into battle. In other news, a regional summit in Kazakhstan, Turkey, In other news, at a regional summit in Kazakhstan, Turkish President Recep Erdogan said his country's aim to stop the bloodshed in Russia-Ukraine war as soon as possible. Erdogan also mentioned Russia's construction of Turkey's first nuclear power plant, which Ankara hopes to open next year, according to the Associated Foreign Press. Erdogan raised the idea of Russia building a second nuclear power plant in northern Turkey. The Turkish president also defended Ankara's booming trade ties with Moscow. The US and the EU are piling pressure on Turkey to comply with sanctions they imposed on Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. But Erdogan has so far refused, offering the NATO member Turkey as a neutral venue for possible truce talks and approving a range of agreements that have seen the value of exports to Russia more than double in recent months. Additionally, a Russian nuclear strike would almost certainly trigger a physical response from Ukraine's allies and potentially from NATO, a senior NATO official has said. NATO's secretive nuclear planning group met today as the alliance moves full ahead with plans to hold a nuclear exercise next week. This decision comes despite deep concerns over President Putin's insistence that he will use any means necessary to defend Russian territory. Defense ministers led the session, which usually happens once or twice a year, at NATO headquarters in Brussels. It comes against the backdrop of high tensions as some NATO allies, led by the United States, supply Ukraine with advanced weapons and munitions to defend itself from Russian aerial attacks. NATO is keeping a wary eye on Russian movements, but has so far seen no change in its nuclear posture. Any use of nuclear weapons by Moscow would have unprecedented consequences for Russia, the official was quoted by Reuters as saying. The US will need to deter 2 major nuclear powers for the first time, the Biden administration has warned. Washington's new national security strategy depicts China as the most capable long-term competitor, but Russia as a more immediate disruptive threat, pointing to its nuclear posturing over Ukraine. Quote, Russia's conventional military will have been weakened, which will likely increase Moscow's reliance on nuclear weapons in its military planning, the strategy blueprint reads. Now, we should mention here, though, that it has been long believed by me, that if Putin were to actually say, launch the nukes, no one would listen to him. Because it would lead to everyone turning on Russia. China has already said that they're not going to back Russia militarily. They're going to buy their oil cheaply because why not? But they're not willing to sacrifice their own soldiers to protect Putin. In fact, there were reports that we've reported on previously that Russia had asked China for help in that regard as well, and China told them no. Not only that, but if it would to launch nukes, and if China would not get involved, which it probably would not, or if it did get involved for its own territory gains in Russia, then Russia would be carved up and experience imperialism from the rest of the West. Because that is the only way to ensure that Russia would no longer be a threat and use its nuclear capabilities that it does have. This would not trigger a Cold War era style everyone launches nukes at everybody moment, in my opinion. And I say that because during the Cold War, we had a bipolar world where everybody was either on Russia's side or the US's side. And that was where the most of the missiles were pointing at. They're all from like the USSR or the United States pointed at each other, right? And that would, if one launched, then everybody would launch theirs, and it would just be basically Russia and the United States killing the rest of the planet. That wouldn't be the case here. I have no reason to believe that. And lastly, everyone in Russia is waiting for Putin to die so that they can take over the klepto state. Russia right now is basically controlled by a dozen or so oligarchs with different buying powers and interest. And those oligarchs are all in the wings, essentially, to be Russia's new leader. Putin is going to end up picking his successor. 100% agree with that. But if he were to launch a nuclear weapon at a target, his ability to pick that successor would be greatly diminished. And not only that, the people that surround him would want to be able to protect Russia as a klepto state in order for them to reap the benefits of that state. And you can't do that if everybody is against you. So I don't think that Russia would launch a nuke. I think it is saber-rattling, and I think it's their last-ditch effort in order to say, we're the scary guys here, you're going to have to listen to us. And you can't let that slide. This is not to say that we should preemptively launch an attack against Russia. I am not saying that. A lot of people would misinterpret my words to say that that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that I don't think there's any reason or all of concern to actually expect Russia to launch a nuke because of the things I just mentioned. But I want to know your thoughts. Go ahead and hit us up over at Twitter, as soon as I can find my act, at Crowdsource Politics or at Crowdsource Poll on Twitter. Continuing on, though, Germany Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Thursday that the war in Ukraine was part of a broader movement against the West by Russia. He said Vladimir Putin and his enablers have made one thing very clear. This war is not only about Ukraine. True. Putin had his way, he'd march all the way to Poland and Germany. They consider their war against Ukraine to be part of a larger crusade, a crusade against liberal democracy. Additionally, NATO allies delivered new air defense systems in the wake of Russia's recent military attacks across the country. Ukraine's defense minister applauded the arrival of the first of 4 Iris-T defense systems from Germany and an expedited delivery of sophisticated National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, NANSAMS, from the United States. France has promised radar and air defense systems in the coming weeks as well. Canada said it would provide artillery rounds and winter clothing, and Britain has pledged to donate AMRAAMs anti-aircraft missiles capable of shooting down cruise missiles as well. So these are good developments. These are going to be things that Ukraine will be able to use in order to repel attack deeper into its borders. Additionally, though, Putin says that Russia is ready to resume gas supplies via one link of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that remains operational. Vladimir Putin claimed Russia's energy providers would resume gas supplies to Europe via the Nord Stream 2 pipeline if the EU asked them to. The ball is in the court of the EU. If they want, they can just open the tap, said the Russian president. The head of the Russian state-owned gas monopoly supplier, Gazprom, has warned Europe of the consequences of renouncing Russian gas. there is no guarantee that Russia or that Europe would survive a winter based on its current gas storage capacity, the supplier said, adding that gas in Germany's underground storage would be enough for between 2 and 2.5 months at best. Recent unexplained explosions damaged Nord Stream 1 pipeline and one of the two links of the as yet unused Nord Stream 2 pipeline, causing a massive gas leak and taking them out of service. Europe has strongly hinted that Moscow was guilty of causing the explosion, while Russia blamed the United States. And finally, the European Commission will present plans next week to mitigate soaring energy costs. Energy Commissioner Cardi Simpson told reporters on Wednesday that the Commission would bring forward a proposal that includes joint gas purchases by 2023. By harnessing the bloc's collective purchasing power, she said, the EU could, quote, avoid member states outbidding each other on the market and thus driving up prices. Which is true. If you have a concerted effort, if you turn, what's the term? So it's a cartel, but cartels are usually the people that sell it. People that buy it. Is it a consortium that buys? Regardless, they're basically trying to create this block of agreed purchaser power, put it in one pool, buy up everything that everybody needs, and avoid a bidding war as member states try to get their own gas supplies. So this is actually a very good development, and it should actually help keep the lid on prices from going too high, but it won't stop prices from increasing, which we'll talk about later in the program. But that, my friends, concludes our talk about Russia and Ukraine war. So if you're just joining us, welcome. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, and we do this every Thursday, roughly at about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or roughly about 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with a kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We also do other shows. We do Cipher State Weekly on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we also do another ad hoc podcast called Praxis Run, where we try to interview people that have put theory into action, otherwise known as praxis, to understand the how and why they do so. So go ahead and check those out wherever you get your podcast or on our YouTube channel. But let's continue on. Make sure I'm not missing any comments. No comments yet. Cool. Let's go ahead and get into U.S. politics, starting off with the Senate advancing judicial confirmations. Reuters reported that Congress may be in recess, but Senate Democrats yesterday pushed ahead with trying to confirm more of President Biden's judicial nominees before the November 8 midterm elections. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, was one of only two lawmakers to attend a hearing in person to hear from 6 of Biden's nominees. The hearings was supposed to have taken place earlier this month, but Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, made the decision to release members so that it could campaign in the run-up to the midterm elections. Pressured by progressive activists to speed up the processing of Biden's judicial nominees while Democrats retained their narrow control of the Senate, Durbin kept the hearing on the books despite Republican opposition. And hey, they don't need to have more than 50 votes for these. So what is there to need about, right? The Republicans jammed through, 250 or so judges under Trump. Tit for tat. Time to get to it, basically. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who is up for re-election, was the lone Republican to attend yesterday's hearing. Grassley didn't stick around for 5 of the 6 district court nominees, who were questioned only by Durbin. The Republican reiterated his opposition to the hearing taking place at all when the Senate was not in session. Quote, "We've already had a problem with the administration's nominees refusing to answer questions," Grassley said, saying he hoped that situation doesn't get even worse today. I mean, what do you care, dude? You will know that this is just a purely partisan process, and it has been for a long time. I know that you have to do this because you're running for re-election and you might be in danger just a little bit, but let's be real. Just call it what it is. No one cares. It doesn't matter. Your constituents don't care. All they have to do is hear you I oppose these nominees. All right, cool. We oppose them too. That's all they need. Don't need these theatrics. These theatrics don't do anything for anybody. Maybe I'm just getting tired of politics a little bit. I don't know. But like there's nothing there. There's no there. Like no one cares, right? It's the same thing like of gesturing at hypocrisy. No one actually cares about hypocrisy. It's not their number one issue, right? They only use it as a way to attack their opponents. When their opponents are being hypocrites, you call them out. And when you're called a hypocrite, you're like, oh, I'm not a hypocrite. This is why. And you try to be more nuanced. What everybody does. And this is no different. Continuing on, though, in response, Durbin cited 4 times from former Republican President Donald Trump era when Republicans, who then controlled the Senate, held hearings when the chamber was not in session. See? Exactly. No one cares about the hypocrisy. They're just trying to shake their fist and get their base riled up to vote. Quote, as I've said many times, we're not going to have one set of rules for Republicans and another for Democrats, Durbin said. Progressive groups like Demand Justice welcomed the hearing. But in a letter released Wednesday, it and other groups urged Durbin to schedule even more, saying 15 nominees are at risk of receiving no committee vote before the year's end. And again, partisanship wins out the day, and this is what we're at now, right? These judicial nominees have to get through before Congress, before January, because if they don't, they'll be held up, even though the process is that the Senate shall advise and consent, or will advise and consent, and they don't have to, as proven by Mitch McConnell. And they won't. They won't hold hearings. That's what they'll try to do. They'll try to not hold any hearings if they win the 2022 midterm elections. If they take control of the Senate, there will not be a hearing for any justice, for any judge that Biden will nominate, unless they get massive concessions of other things. Because that's where we are. We're not at, let's keep the process moving. We're not there. We're at, let's make the process only work for us. And that is how this will go. You hate to see it. It's really, really upsetting that is the case, right? But it is what it is, and this is just the times that we live in. We live in very partisanship times, very divided times. And in those times, that's when people go to their base. And that's what this is. 2022 is going to be a base election. We just got to hope that more people that are on your side show up to vote than the other, because it's not going to be moderates making these determinations. Moderates aren't going to swing wildly from one party to the next. Moderates don't typically vote. Moderates typically don't vote, at least in numbers, on off-year elections, on midterm elections. They come out to vote in presidential elections every 4 years. Easy to remember, easy to keep track of. The president's important, basically a king, right? So we have to vote for that. But the people that aren't politically engaged, like day to day, like people that watch this show, watch NPR, even watch Fox News every day. Like people that aren't doing that, they aren't paying attention all that much. They don't vote. I think the last midterm election, 2018's midterm election turnout. I think it was a weird election turnout. Yeah. 49.4% of eligible voters voted in 2018. In 2020, the percentage turnout was, what was the percentage turnout? Let's see. 66.8%. A near 30, almost a 30% difference of turnout. So we have to recognize this. Like, people that go and vote in midterms are more likely to be partisan. It's just the way it is. All right. Well, we gotta also find a little thing here, because there's a couple of videos about what we want to talk about. So Republicans will use debt limit to cut security. Need a video about this. This is good. This is good stuff. We're gonna watch a Let's see. Well, let's go ahead and continue on, though, and try to find it later. All right. In a report from Bloomberg, Republicans in the House are planning to use negotiations on the federal debt limit to force Democrats to make changes in Social Security and Medicare. The developing plan hinges on Republicans winning control of the House in the midterm election. GOP lawmakers who are vying for leadership of the House Budget Committee, if there's a Republican victory, said that the need to raise the debt ceiling would give them the leverage necessary to force Democrats to make concessions. Quote, the debt limit is clearly one of those tools that a Republican-controlled Congress, will use to make sure that we do everything we can to make the economy strong, said Representative Jason Smith of Missouri, the senior Republican on the current Budget Committee. Although the details are still up in the air, one theme is clear. House Republicans want to reduce federal spending, and the major entitlement programs are a target. Representative Buddy Carter, Republican of Georgia, said that Republicans' main focus has got to be on entitlements. Earlier this year, the Republican Study Committee released a plan to raise the eligible age for Social Security to 70 years old, and the eligibility for Medicare to 67. That is huge. Right now, the age is 65 for both. You can take it a little earlier. You can take it a little bit earlier, depending on, certain circumstances. But you're going to raise it by 5 years for Social Security. How many people live to the age of 70? Realistically speaking, how many people live that long? Let's look it up. The median age of death in the United States. Median age of death in the United States is 74.5 years old on average. That's how long a person lives. U.S. women are 5.7 years older, reaching 80.2. Now, what is the median age of death? That was the average. I want the median. Let's see. Average. No. I don't want average age. Average age looking at 73. So like a lot of people die well before before that Social Security number would come in. And yes, Thomas, I gotta reload this. Reload. Man. Well, Thomas said over on YouTube, too funny from spendthrift Republicans. Very true. Very true. But yeah, so that's what they want to do. They want to raise the age of retirement to the point that people are almost basically dead or have already died, so they don't have to pay it out. Because they don't think these things should exist in the first place. If they had their way, no Social Security would exist. People would have to rely on the generosity of strangers, which we all know from experience does not work out very well at all. I mean, the free market could provide, but it doesn't. Free market doesn't provide charity. Because people are generally selfish and ignorant when it comes to situations like this. So make no mistake, like if they go through with this, it's going to materially hurt people. People will be vastly hurt by a change like this. We can talk about what we need to do to like tinker on Social Security and Medicare to make them more financially robust in order to have it to where they continue to be solvent. We can talk about things like that. That's a good thing to talk about. But simply raising the age to the point where most people are, where a lot of people are dying already, that's not tenable. In wealthy countries, we've made the determination that people should be able to retire and not have to work their whole lives. That's partly why we have Social Security. We also have it to ensure that old people are not in abject poverty, or help ensure that people are not in abject poverty when they're old. When it was introduced, it cut old age poverty by like 80% when it was first passed. That was like one of its goals. So yeah, it's just they just don't like poor people. That's what it boils down to. Republicans don't like poor people, and no matter what anybody tells you about Republicans coming up for the working class or what have you, it's just not there. They don't care. They don't, because that's what these kind of things do. Continuing on though with the copy here. The increases would be phased in over time, and once the target is reached, the eligibility age would then be indexed to life expectancy. They're already doing it well too high for life expectancy. This is basically saying as life expectancy goes up, we'll bring the retirement age even further, despite the fact that, you know, people are already on average dying within the 4 years that this goes into effect. Right? And people's bodies start to deteriorate well before 70, especially if they're working people their whole lives. People on their feet doing manual labor or grueling, you know, long days. Even if you're just standing there for a, you know, checkout counter in a grocery store, that wears on your body. 12-hour shift wears on your body. Doesn't matter what kind of job you're doing. Not only that, though, the lawmakers also called for increased means testing in the Medicare program and a privatization option for Social Security. If they can privatize it, they're going to try to privatize it because that means more money for their backers. Republicans still, by and large, are the party of Wall Street. Now, Wall Street has hands in both parties because that's what rich people do. They try to hedge bets, right? You have the money to do so, you're going to put some money over here, you're going to put some money over there, and hopefully you'll come out on top and you'll get a Kirsten Sinema out of the deal, right? But you don't see Democrats making stuff like this. Just saying. Additionally, other options being considered include more stringent work requirements and income limits for what Smith called welfare programs, including the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, more commonly referred to as food stamps. Yeah, Thomas, you're probably partly right. The U.S. Fed government can afford an abundant pension for all, starting at around $4,000 a month and beginning at age 50. Probably could. Might not want to start at that young. We can argue about that, but there's no reason why an old couple should be, you know, living off of $1,000 a month. I don't care how long they worked, right? That's just not tenable because they can't work. It's not like one of those situations where old people can just like suddenly figure it out and go back to work and work the hours upon hours upon hours that they were used to when they were younger. They're not physically capable of it necessarily. A lot of people aren't. Some are, but not everybody is. Your body just dies over time, you know? And then they want to cut food. They want to cut SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits are one of the primary programs that pays for itself and then some. It's like every dollar that SNAP benefits goes out, another $1.75 in economic activity is put back into the system. It generates economic activity. It helps GDP. It helps Wall Street. And yet they want to cut it. Again, they don't care about poor people. They also want to introduce new caps on discretionary spending, which could limit in spending increases over the next 10 years. One thing that will not be cut, because despite what Tulsi Gabbard tells you, which we'll get into later, is the defense spending. Because at the end of the day, Republicans are still all about that military power. Representative Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, told Bloomberg that he wants to cut non-defense spending in order to provide more money for the military. Go figure. I mean, Raytheon provides a lot of money to Republicans, right? So oil execs need that cushion from defense buying up a lot of gas and diesel, right? That's what we got here. However, Republicans say they are leery about pushing too far in their demands. But many experts think that any effort to use the debt limit as leverage in negotiations is unacceptably risky. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has warned that defaulting on U.S. debt payments, which would occur if the U.S. failed to raise the debt ceiling, would cause a catastrophe in the global economy. Hey, what's one more stab into the global economy? You know, what's one more? The global economy can take it, right? It can take the Fed raising rates into stagflation, and then the federal government, United States government, which provides a lot of money to pretty much everybody because we buy everybody's stuff. What's one more jab in that, right? I mean, the United States is the lender of last resort for the entire world. We are one of the safest assets. We are the safest asset. U.S. debt is the safest asset in the entire world. And Republicans were just, don't need it anymore. Fuck them. We don't care about our position in the world. We don't care about the global economy. We just want Wall Street money. And this would hurt Wall Street immensely. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Democrats do have one option, though, for disarming Republicans ahead of a debt ceiling showdown. They could attempt to raise the ceiling on their own during the lame duck session at the end of the year, potentially denying the GOP the use of that weapon. But both Yarmouth and Senator Tim Kaine told Bloomberg that there has been no discussion among Democrats about such a plan. We expect to see Republicans taking a page from the Tea Party playbook, with attempts to force spending reductions in the next Congress, reductions that could involve fundamental changes in the way our country's top safety net programs operate. This seems like a good place to remind everybody that elections matter. And that concludes that section. Man, it's just all kinds of stuff. Just all kinds of stuff. Let's go over to the comments really quick. So Thomas D, at age 50, the job for life corporations of the Fortune 500 once gave employees poorly and discharging them. Age 49, they were 5-star. The wrong answer was forcing them to employ them until age 70. True. Gave them poor performance reviews, etc. Yes. So for people that might not have understood my comments about that, what I was writing him, basically the whole, like, we're going to work you until you're 50, but so we don't have to pay the pension, just boop, kick you off. That happened a lot, especially during the 80s. So, gotta love shareholder capitalism, man. No, you don't. Shareholder capitalism is gross. And I, for one, am looking forward to a return to stakeholder capitalism. Hopefully it happens, but we'll see. So we're going to continue on with the news roundup, though. And now we're going to talk about immigration. Venezuelans to Mexico. What's this about? Let's talk about it. International Business Times reported that U.S. and Mexican officials have agreed to a plan to curb rousing numbers of Venezuelans crossing their shared border. The plan will enable the United States to expel Venezuelans to Mexico, while also granting humanitarian access to thousands of them by air. The plan went into effect yesterday. U.S. authorities will begin managing access of 24,000 Venezuelan migrants by air, the two governments said in a statement. Quote, "These actions make clear that there is a lawful and orderly way for Venezuelans to enter the United States, and lawful entry is the only way," U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas said in a statement. Continuing on, he said, "Those who attempt to cross the southern border of the United States illegally will return to Mexico and will be ineligible for the process in the future. Essentially, remain in Mexico policy for Venezuelans." Biden has struggled politically to cope with the record migrant detentions at the U.S. southwest border, which has been fueled by an increase in people coming from Venezuela, as well as Cuba and Nicaragua. His Republican adversaries have criticized what they view as Biden's failure to secure the border. The criticism is largely couched in misinformation that the southern border is open and millions of undocumented people are flooding into the United States. The fact is that detentions at the border and immediate deportations are the highest they have been in our history, and gotaways have been reduced by Biden's border policies as well. The US-Mexico plan will be based on the Uniting for Ukraine program, the two governments said. The program allows Ukrainians to enter the United States by securing a sponsor and applying from outside the country. Mexico said that to cope with increased flows, it would temporarily allow some Venezuelan nationals to enter Mexico through the US border. More than 150,000 Venezuelans were picked up at the US-Mexican border between October of 2021 and August of 2022, according to US government data. That compares to nearly 48,000 Venezuelans apprehended at the US-Mexican border in the fiscal year of 2021. Mexican officials argued that the economic sanctions against the government of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro are fueling illegal immigration and should be eased. And he's not wrong about that. He's correct. The amount of sanctions against Venezuela, even though Venezuelan's government is complete shit, is contributing to the problem. Continuing on, though, the United States was already expelling hundreds of Venezuelans to Mexico before the plan was announced, a Mexican official said. To qualify for the new entry program, a person or organization based in the United States must support the applicant's request, and they would enter U.S. territory by air. Those seeking to apply must not go to the US-Mexico border, Mexico's government said. Venezuelans who enter Mexico or Panama illegally will not be eligible for the program, US officials have said. Let's read that again. Venezuelans who enter Mexico or Panama illegally will not be eligible for the program. This means that we're going with Mexico and Panama together to try to prevent illegal immigration from Venezuela into these three states, three nations. Doing a little bit of a roundabout way of trying to prevent asylum seekers from crossing into the border, essentially. Continuing on, at Mexico's request, the United States will provide an additional 65,000 temporary visas to migrants for non-agricultural jobs, the Mexican government has said. Of those, 20,000 will be allocated to Central Americans and Haitians. This follows reporting earlier this month that Mexico is now committing $1.5 billion over 2 years for smart border technology on their end. And in return, the U.S. is going to increase the number of workers and refugee visas and provide more worker protections for them. So this is the Biden administration. This is the Biden administration trying to do comprehensive border reform, comprehensive immigration reform on the margins of what can be done. Our friend over at Tiberius D, Geopolitics with Tiberius D, interviewed our other friend Nate Dallin last week and talked about all the kind of ways that we can try to fix immigration and what causes illegal immigration, etc. So you guys should go ahead and check that out. I will drop the link in chat here now, actually. Let's go ahead and get that in. Go to YouTube. I'll get it for you guys because I think it's a good thing, and Tiberius did a really good job on the editing of it, and the interview was good. That's good stuff. So we'll go ahead and drop the video for you. Immigration, where and why. Yoink. So go ahead and check this video out. I just dropped it in the chat. Hopefully it comes up. Yep. So yeah, go ahead and check out that video over at Tiberius' channel. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Comprehensive. We did a comprehensive immigration talk with Nate Dallin and Jenny Homs, a member of our community. So we'll drop that link for y'all as well, actually. Let's go ahead and do that. It's also a good video. We'll get it in a minute. Immigration. Oh, come on. Videos. People. Huh. Okay. Can't find it. I'll drop it in the comments after streaming. I don't want to keep too much of the time just because I can't find it right now. But yeah, that's what we talked about. We talked about immigration and the ways that we can fix it, and what things are memes and what things are serious. So yeah, go ahead and check that video out. But we got to continue on. And as we said early in the program, we are going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, the person leftists and right wingers both love for different reasons, or maybe it's the same reason. Well, let's talk about it. In this final brief about US politics directly, we are going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard's announcing her departure from the Democratic Party. A long time coming, and something that Hillary Clinton was right about again. So let's go ahead and open up the Twitter and watch her little 1-minute spiel about it.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers.
Elitist cabal of warmongers. I seem to remember that Trump actually assassinated an Iranian general who was also basically their Secretary of State. So yeah, cool.
Who were driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide.
Oh, cowardly wokeness. Oh, that's what it's always been, huh?
Us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism.
Oh, okay. So racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism. You just racialized the issues. Okay.
Who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined.
God-given freedoms. Okay. Okay. So this is why I left the left, because you're not a leftist and never were.
Enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith, spirituality.
No. Democrats are not hostile to people of faith. A lot of Democrats are people of faith. What Democrats are hostile to are bigots. People that try to use their religion in order to justify their outright bigotry and oppose liberalism on the grounds of religion. That is what Democrats are hostile to. That's what you are hostile to. But when it only came to brown people, Muslims specifically. I seem to remember that Tulsi Gabbard did a tour. You know what? Let's let her finish. We'll get into it later.
Who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans.
More lies. So, demonizing the police. I think when police fuck up, they need to be held accountable. When they don't fuck up, they're fine. They fuck up a lot, though. In fact, some people would say that policing in its very nature, the way that it's done in the United States, increases their chances of fucking up, and that we should do things on a systemic level to prevent those fuck ups, like taking away some of the burden that we put on police officers, like, I don't know, dealing with mental health issues, and giving it to people actually trained to deal with those. We have a term for this. But is it defund the police? Oh, okay. Oh, accidentally.
Borders who weaponize, who believe the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans. Who believe in open borders, who
No. As we just said in our last segment, no. Democrats are not for open borders. Democrats are enforcing the border. They're enforcing the law. This is just more, the Great Wall of Trump didn't get built. Ergo, the border is wide open. It's bullshit.
Weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents.
Okay. So Hillary was right. She's being groomed by Bannon to be a right-wing populist. Yeah.
And above all, we're dragging us ever closer to nuclear war.
Yes. The United States is dragging us closer to nuclear war under Biden, not Putin. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Sure.
Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite.
Okay. As we just said, Republicans want to gut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. They want to force people to work well into their 70s in order to still maintain any standard of living in their old age, even if they can't. They're not for things like universal health care, which I thought, Tulsi, you were for. Weren't you a Bernie backer? Or was that all just a ploy? I think it was all just a ploy, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll let her finish.
I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats.
I'm calling on independent-minded Democrats to join me and the MAGA Republicans against the woke mob, right? What you're saying?
To join me in leaving the Democratic Party.
Yes.
If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking.
Oh, yeah. Tulsi, you're using your powers of attraction for evil.
Taking our country, I invite you to join me.
Okay. So that is Tulsi Gabbard's Why I Left the Left video. We're going to talk a little bit about this, right? Because it's more than just leaving the left and becoming an independent. It's more than just leaving the Democratic Party and becoming independent. She's not pulling an Andrew Yang here. She is actually going in and endorsing Don Bolduc, a New Hampshire MAGA Republican, for Senate. She is going against everything that she stood for, or claimed to stand for, when she was running as a Democrat. So, why did she do this? Well, I can tell you why she did it. Because she is power. She wants power. She is one of these people, and you know, what, game recognized game, right? That's what they say. She's one of these people that did things for why, and the reason that she did them, in order to position herself, in order to run for elected office. And not just any elected office, the presidency. This is what happens when you have a person that grew up in a religious cult, who still has those kind of proclivities, because she does. She, in 2020, in her 2020 bid for the Democratic nomination, 2019 or so, she had an interview with a local Hawaii paper, talked about why she was running as a Democrat for president and all this stuff. Talked about how she went to Iraq and saw what religious extremism does, and why that convinced her to not want a dominionist, religious-backed government in the United States. But she still didn't like gay people. She'd still think they shouldn't have gotten married. She just wanted the government to stay out of it. That's not a circle you can square. Not really. Ergo, everything she just said. And during Obama's presidency, when she was in Congress, and after doing her first tour of duty in Iraq, she went on the Fox News circuit. And when I say the Fox News circuit, I mean she was on multiple programs talking about her experiences in Iraq and her experiences with radical Islamists, and how we need to basically back secular dictators in these countries in order to tamp down on radical extremism, and called out Obama for not doing it well enough. This is a person that was supposedly anti-war, but wanted the United States to be in Syria, helping Assad. She said this before meeting Assad. She said that the United States and Russia should be together, bombing the fuck out of the rebels in Syria because they were radical extremists that needed to be dealt with swiftly. And we need to have a dictator on our side in order to prevent them from taking over and becoming a hotbed of terrorism and terrorist recruitment. But Democrats are warmongers for helping in Ukraine against Putin, who started the war. 100% started the war. We can talk about supposed assurances, supposed deals that the United States made with Russia of not expanding NATO and going back on those. We can talk about that. That is a fair conversation to have. What is not a fair conversation to have, what is completely ignoring the realities on the ground, is then trying to use those things to justify violating the sovereign territory of another nation in order to prevent them from joining NATO, because you see NATO as an existential threat to your existence. Instead of going through proper channels, instead of going and buying up loyalty or doing other things, they decided to invade. And not only invade, mind you, because the Ukrainian war, the war in Ukraine, the Russia war in Ukraine, is not just about preventing Ukraine from joining NATO. They want all of Ukraine to be back in Russian territory. They think, and Putin has said this multiple times, that the Ukrainian national identity is they said something along the lines of that it is a fiction created by the fecklessness of past Russian leaders, and it doesn't actually exist. You know what that means? That means they want to commit genocide. They want Ukrainians' national identity, its identity as a distinct ethnic group of people, to be erased. But Democrats are the warmongers in this. Yeah, Democrats, right? The woke Democrats are warmongers because they are doing something to try to prevent Putin from taking over territory further. Makes you think, right? This is something that Hillary Clinton actually spoke about. She said that Bannon was grooming Tulsi in order to be a GOP operative. Fast forward 2 years. I think she said this in 2018. 2 years. 2 to 4 years. And here we are. Tulsi Gabbard praising MAGA. Praising populist right-wingers. Because this isn't just populism. Okay? You can say that you can be anti-establishment, pro-populist without going like this. Without releasing a video of why I left the left. And you go back on everything you stood for. Everything you stood for. When you were in office and supposedly a Bernie supporter and the such. And it's not going to stop here. She started a podcast. Her podcast is going to be used and amplified by right-wingers to show how much the Democrats have lost their way, to try to convince people to join the Republican MAGA party. And if she does well enough, they might offer her a vice president seat. Because that's what this is leading to. I don't know if I'm the first to say it, but I am saying it today. Tulsi Gabbard is still gunning for the presidency, and she's just thinking that she can hitch her wagons to the populist right in order to get there. But she can't, because she's not white. And I'm going to show you why. But before I do that, Thomas says, at least she's not opportunistic as Nikki Fork Tongue Haley. Oh, she is. That's what this is. She is rebranding herself as a populist right-winger in order to try to hitch her wagons to it. But we got to do more about her right now. We're going to turn over to our boy Tucker Carlson. Now, before we get through it, I just want to show how Tulsi looks in her thumbnails. Okay? Her thumbnails. You can see up here. Versus how she looks, right? In her videos. Okay? Noticing anything? Okay. Noticing anything? Does it look like they darkened her? I think it does. But Tucker Carlson is a fawning little boy. He's pretty strong. He's going all in on Tulsi Gabbard and boosting her video about why she left the left. We're going to watch this a little bit. We're going to watch it on 1.25 speed, at least here, because I don't want to give him the full time of day, but it's important to understand what he's saying. And we might skip around a bit, okay? Probably going to skip around a bit. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. So when Tulsi Gabbard won the Democratic Party's primary for a congressional seat in Hawaii 10 years ago, she'd effectively won the seat.
Oh, yeah. And let's make no mistake about this. Before we get in with the video, Tulsi only ran as a Democrat because only a Democrat could win that seat. During the time that she ran for that seat, she was still very much anti-gay marriage. She was still very much had very strong conservative leanings. She would have been perfectly okay within the Republican Party, especially in Hawaii, because Hawaii is a little bit more liberal even among Republicans. But she ran as a Democrat because that is the only people that could win in Hawaii. This is what I mean when I say she's opportunistic. Well, let's go watch.
Hawaii may be the most liberal out of all 50 states. It is a Democratic state, flat out.
Yeah, like I just said.
It has not voted for a Republican presidential candidate in nearly 40 years. So if you get elected as a Democrat in Hawaii, it's not exactly breaking news. It's standard operating procedure. And yet when Tulsi Gabbard won that primary and then the seat, the Democratic National Party took a deep interest in her, and you can see why. Here was a smart, appealing 31-year-old who knew what she believed and could explain it fluently. And by the way, she was also an Iraq War veteran. So in political terms, Tulsi Gabbard was near perfect, and they got it immediately. Barack Obama endorsed her right away. Nancy Pelosi called her personally and invited Tulsi Gabbard, did you remember this, to speak on the opening night of the Democratic National Convention. And then when she was sworn into Congress in January, the DNC named Tulsi Gabbard vice chair of the National Party. She just got in there.
Yeah. Because she specifically did this in order to go through her political ambitions. She didn't join the regular army. She joined the National Guard. Think about that.
There. And she was vice chair of the DNC. And then, of course, the media played its prescribed role. If Nancy Pelosi likes you, well, so do they. So fawning profile after fawning profile emerged.
I mean, okay, so what Tucker Carlson's saying here, hate the guy, all right? He's spinning a narrative. He's not wrong about these parts. These parts are true. All right. And he's not wrong about the implication that he's laying down on this. Because she was basically out of central casting when she ran, as she ran. Because at the time, Democrats were still trying to appeal to more moderate Republicans. Because they believed that the Republicans would work with them. Oh, how quickly that hope faded.
If you lived in Washington at the time, you remember it very well. Here, ladies and gentlemen, the future of the Democratic Party, Tulsi Gabbard. In case you don't remember, here's a selection to jog your memory.
Watch out for the next superstar.
Here we go. You're talking about off air always. Here we go.
Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is a rising star in this party. Tulsi Gabbard should be here tonight. The reality is we do not have enough young veterans in this party, enough young women in this party, enough people of color in this party.
You're
None of
considered
this-
a
none of
rising
this
star
is
in the
wrong.
Democratic Party. You had a position of leadership in the Democratic National Committee.
Tulsi's story is really, I think, tailor-made for Hollywood. I half expect Natalie Portman to be vying for the role any day now, because this story is not to be believed.
Tulsi Gabbard, she is going to
All
be
right, we're
one to
gonna
watch tonight.
I don't care about this. Let's go skip ahead and
Did you hear that? She's a rising star. Hollywood's going to make a movie about her. I want her in my trench.
go ahead and.
It's pretty hard to believe
up
now,
to
but that
speed
was
here.
the absolute consensus among Democratic Party sycophants until 2016. In 2016, as if by command from above, the fawning stopped abruptly, replaced initially by silence, and then by howls of scorned rage.
Okay. So Tucker Carlson's leaving out a lot of stuff here. Okay. This is the stuff that I talked about earlier in this segment. He is leaving out the fact that she went on the Fox News circuit to talk about radical Islam and to talk about how the United States needs to be bombing more and that Obama wasn't doing enough and that how we shouldn't shut down Guantanamo Bay. She was still anti-gay marriage. She was claiming that she wasn't. She was claiming that she didn't want the government involved in that, but her personal beliefs were that gay people were still icky. That's when lefties that were paying attention, liberals that were paying attention, started to sour on her. Basically, as soon as she got into office. Now, this part, the part that he's about to talk about right here, 2016, is when she went and visited Syria. She visited Syria to find out what was going on for her own eyes. Fair. You can do that. Private citizens can do it. Congressional members certainly can do it. Fact-finding missions are important. But she didn't do a fact-finding mission. She went in on the behest of Assad. Let's watch.
What happened in 2016? Well, Donald Trump was elected president. And then a few days later, displaying the independence of spirit that Democrats claim to love in young women, but actually despise more than anything, Tulsi Gabbard decided to talk to the new president about an issue that she cared about, which was U.S. policy towards Syria, a country that, again, Gabbard was virtually alone in pointing out has an awful lot of Christians in it, so maybe we should pay attention.
Ah, see, there it is. There it is. Christians are in Syria. We have to care about the Christians. They're going to get slaughtered by the radical Islamist terrorist. But he's leaving out the fact that she visited Syria prior to Trump winning. She actually visited Syria and came back to the United States to talk about it. Tulsi visits Syria. Tulsi visits Syria. When did she visit Syria? Tulsi Gabbard reveals she met Assad in Syria without informing top Democrats. Let's look at this. All right. Democrats were silent on Thursday as Tulsi Gabbard, one of the party's sitting lawmakers in Congress, announced that she had met with Bashar al-Assad during a trip to war-torn Syria and dismissed his entire opposition as terrorist. Gabbard, a Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii, disclosed her meeting with the Syrian president on Wednesday during what her office called a fact-finding mission. Curious. Initially, I hadn't planned on meeting him, Gabbard told CNN's Jack Tapper. When the opportunity arose to meet with him, I did so because I felt it's important that if we profess to truly care about the Syrian people, about their suffering, then we've got to be able to meet with anyone that we need to if there is a possibility we could achieve peace. Again, he said all cost. It's almost like they're just full of shit. When she met Syria, when she met Bashar al-Assad, he was already credibly accused of violating human rights. Yes, and as Jason says here, Syrian war criminal president. This was after he already cracked down on protesters that led to the war by taking on an entire city. An entire city. To crush opposition to his rule. This isn't just one of those, we don't know what's going on. This was years into knowing what was going on. But she decided to visit Syria. I wonder why. Now, when did she do this, though? That's what I want to know. That's what I came to this article to find out. Kissinger told reporters Republican policy retreat in Philadelphia. In no way should any member of Congress, should any government official ever travel to meet a guy that has killed 500,000 people and 50,000 children. Kissinger called on the leadership in both parties to condemn Gabbard's trip and questioned how it was financed. But Kissinger, like Gabbard, an Iraq war veteran, said he would need to know more to file an ethics complaint against his colleague. Becoming stooges for foreign dictators. Yeah. I want to know when she actually did it. When did she did it? Yeah, there's 47 Democrats sided with Republicans and backed GOP-sponsored measure that would essentially block all Syrian Iraqi refugees, blah, blah, blah. In November, Gabbard met with then-President-elect Donald Trump to discuss foreign policy. Trump has stated he will end assistance to U.S.-backed Syrian rebels. His son, Donald Trump Jr., met privately with pro-Russian diplomats and political figures in October to discuss the Syrian conflict. During an interview with CNN, Gabbard claimed the U.S. was funding terrorist groups by assisting Syrian rebels, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't know when it actually happened. But it happened. And that's what he's leaving out here. This happened prior to Trump winning. She met with Trump prior to him sitting in office. So she admitted to colleagues that she had did this. Right? But this was after. This was before he was officially president. Now, I'm not going to say that nobody should meet with President Trump. That was fine. I don't care about that. But, yeah. And as Thomas says, again, that outcome was predicted the first week the fighting began, that he would That outcome was predicted the first week the fighting began, that he would imitate his grandfather and win by any free means necessary. And he did just that. True. I need to pull this up. No. Where's the... not the call to action. Camera highlights. There we go. All right. Let's continue on with the Tucker.
As she put it at the time, quote, I felt it was important to take the opportunity to meet with the president-elect now, before the drumbeats of war that neocons have been beating drag us into an escalation of the war to overthrow the Syrian government. Woo, we can't say that in Washington. Maybe she didn't know. But they told her, shh, stop. Let the adults do it. But Gabbard didn't seem to care. A few weeks later, she went personally to Syria. She was a member of Congress. You can do that. And she wanted to see conditions for herself. And then while
they said weeks later, she did that. Weeks earlier, rather. And it should be noted here that Tucker has been backing Putin a lot. He's against the neocons, unless it's against Iran. Wonder why. Couldn't be the Left Behind books, could it? No. That is why. We need to do an episode about those. For those that may not know, a lot of Christians, a lot of evangelicals, I don't know how many, okay? Well, I'm saying a lot. And probably not even a majority, right? But more than a few percentage points. Okay, we'll say double-digit percentage points. That's a lot, right? I feel like 10% is a lot. Believe that the Left Behind series is prophecy. And what happens in the Left Behind series? Well, God stops Iran from blowing up Israel. Peculiar. Peculiar. Why is that the case? Couldn't be because of Iran-Contra. Couldn't be because of politics, could it? It is.
While she was there, she met with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
All right, we're going to skip forward a bit.
But in the end, she's with Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney on Team Raytheon. She does not cross that line because you're not allowed to. But Tulsi Gabbard is...
So he's basically saying here that she can't cross the warmongers and the Raytheon and the Bill Kristols, yada, 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 yada.
Someone who had served in the U.S. military, in fact, was still serving in the U.S. military, was an elected member of Congress, decided, why shouldn't I say what I think? And so she did. And for doing that, overnight, her fellow Democrats accused Tulsi Gabbard, the combat veteran you'd want in your foxhole, of committing treason against the country she was serving. Hillary Clinton went even farther than that. Speaking of conspiracy nuts, Hillary Clinton way crazier than Alex Jones ever thought of being. She claimed the Russians were grooming Tulsi Gabbard as some kind of Manchurian candidate. You want to listen to lunacy? Listen to this.
Yeah, but she was right. That's exactly what's going on. Also, she said this about Steve Bannon, not Russians.
Not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's a favorite of the Russians.
Well, that's just completely whacked. Is she a crisis actor too? What a lunatic. But no one noticed because everyone was saying it. The LA Times, which at one point was an actual newspaper, accused Tulsi Gabbard of, quote, talking like a Russian asset, maybe a spy.
She was.
So the years went by and Tulsi Gabbard decided to run for president, still as a Democrat, as she had been in her entire time in Congress. She'd always been a Democrat.
Years later, I'm sorry, Clinton said that in 2019.
Of course, the vice chair of the DNC. And so she wound up in a presidential debate in October of 2019, and she responded to the smears against her. Watch this.
All right, let's, before we watch that, let's go over here, and then Clinton says Bannon grooming Tulsi. Because that's what it was actually about. That's what it was actually about. Currently grooming a Democrat running for president, blah, blah, blah. Pretty sure what exactly is Tulsi Gabbard up to? New York Times, November 2019. The Russian asset and warmonger, the roots of Gabbard taking flack for Syrian President Shah, blah, blah, blah. I was pretty sure this was about Bannon. Maybe it was a different quote. It was about Bannon. Last week in the report literally put Hillary Clinton in a Halloween witch hat. Steve Bannon, President Trump's Bannon arranged for her to have a face-to-face meeting with Trump. Yeah, there it is. Gabbard, with her sympathy for regime in Syria, as well as her defense of WikiLeaks' decisions to release emails from the Democratic National Committee in 2016, reportedly hacked by Russians, and willingness to attack fellow Democrats, make her an ideal candidate for use by Russians. Trump loyalists saw the potential in Gabbard in 2016. Bannon arranged for her to have a face-to-face meeting with Trump to have her considered for a post in administration, possibly an ambassador to the United Nations. That was taken by Haley. On podcasts and online videos, the interviews when Trump feeds alt-right internet stars, white nationalists, libertarian activists, and some of the biggest boosters of Trump heap praise on Miss Gabbard. The New York Times reported 2 weeks ago of this article. So yeah, that's what's going on here. It wasn't just Putin. Putin likes to help any candidate that's going to help him. And in this regard, well, with Clinton and the Democratic Party, he could not have a friend with somebody that would actually care about Putin taking over territory. So he was going to back the ones that he could. That's what he did.
New York Times and CNN have also smeared veterans like myself for calling for an end to this regime change war. Just 2 days ago, the New York Times put out an article saying that I'm a Russian asset and an Assad apologist and all these different smears. This morning, a CNN
that's what you did. Hello?
Commentator said on national television that I'm an asset of Russia. Completely despicable. As president, I will end these regime change wars by doing two things. Ending the draconian sanctions that are really a modern-day siege, the likes of which we are seeing Saudi Arabia wage against Yemen, that have caused tens and thousands of Syrian civilians to die.
I mean, that's a good thing. That should have been ended. Good for her. But Syria was a issue of a war criminal and a human rights abuser taking out everybody and radicalizing the people in order to maintain power. That's what it was.
And to starve. And I would make sure that we stop supporting terrorists like Al-Qaeda in Syria, who've been the ground force in this ongoing regime change war.
But that wasn't who we were primarily supporting. No. Primarily we were supporting, at the time that she was talking about this, at that time, before then, while Obama was president, we were supporting the Kurds. Not Al-Qaeda. And we didn't support Al-Qaeda. We dropped weapons for a melange of different groups, but not al-Nusra. And not Al-Qaeda. Yeah, Tucker Carlson really is just pissed off that Jon Stewart obliterated him in that Crossfire debate.
They called her a Russian asset. Now, that slur is so common that we don't really think about it. Think about it just for a second. This is a transparently patriotic person, an elected member of Congress who was serving in the U.S. Army, who's also, by the way, one of the nicest people in all of Washington, who is making traditional...
Oh, nicest people and all what? Tucker, you couldn't make it more obvious. You just find her attractive, dude.
...liberal points about war. Not that all wars are bad or war is never necessary. She's participated in wars personally. She's merely saying, and has said dozens of times on television, that wars that don't benefit the United States are probably a bad idea for us to engage in. That's all she said. And
which is why she's never been completely anti-war. Never understood that about people. Okay? People saying that she's completely anti-war. She's not. She wanted us to drone more the fuck out of people.
That, she was run out of town. But why is that? Why is that such an unacceptable thing to say? Well, of course, because there's a pattern here. Certain people do benefit from wars and they want more. So 3 years after that debate, another US-funded regime change war is underway. And that is exactly what's happening. This time, our stated goal is removing not some third world dictator who might have WMD, but removing a guy who is the world's largest nuclear stockpile.
Ah, there it is. There it is. Tucker Carlson coming to the aid of Putin once again. Tucker Carlson, fuckface Carlson, the man with the vision, the plan to take it to the liberals, and with his stupid ass bow tie that he no longer wears because he got made fun of for wearing it. Hey, bow ties are cool, okay? All right, I'm not gonna make any fun of anybody wearing a bow tie, but have you noticed that he has not worn one since? Really got into his skin. Triggered! Or something. I don't know. Right? Yeah, it's just a little observation for you. Just a little observation. But once again, Tucker Carlson is backing a dictator, violating human rights, all against American interest. This is one of those situations where, on the one hand, we have somebody doing abhorrently evil shit, Putin, and that abhorrently evil shit actually melding with Americans' interest in the area, and so we're getting involved. Even if an American interest weren't here, I would be supporting arming the Ukrainians against Russia. Why? For the same reason why I didn't bitch when Iran armed Iraqis against the United States. And I served in Afghanistan and I was in the military. Because when you violate the rights of another nation, other nations have the moral duty to help prevent you from violating those rights further. And if they don't have the moral duty, they have the moral right to do so, at least. Even if they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I said it. Okay? Now, let me clarify. So if I get clip chipped, that's fine. I didn't support Iran doing this. Fuck Iran. Right? Fuck them. But I wasn't going to bitch about it. Which is what he's doing.
6,300 nuclear warheads. Vladimir Putin. And once again, because Tulsi Gabbard has questioned the wisdom of this.
See, even though, well, let's go to the main page here. So way earlier in this program, go watch it. I said that Putin is not going to launch nuclear weapons. He's not. Russia is a klepto state. And everybody is waiting on old ass Putin to die. So they can take over the klepto state and become filthy rich and absurdly powerful. And if Russia were to launch a nuke, even a tactical one, even an airburst tactical one, Russia would be carved up by everybody. Everyone would carve up Russia. Russia would become the modern imperialist. No, Russia would be colonized. 100% colonized by every major actor in the world. For two reasons. First, it's got a fuck ton of natural resources, and everyone's going to be pissed off that Russia launched nukes. Everybody is. The West isn't going to take that line down. China doesn't want to back Russia in this. They want to be able to take Taiwan and still live as a country, still exist without nuclear fallout. So they're not going to back that. So that's one reason to do it. The second reason is because if Putin goes through with this, the only way to prevent nuclear strike from Russia ever again is to carve it up like a turkey on Thanksgiving dinner. That would be the only reason, that would be the only way to ensure that Russia never again was a threat to another country. Not just a threat, a devastatingly nuclear fallout type of threat. It would be carved up, all its nuclear arms would be taken away. No country that exists out of that carve up would be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And then Russia would be rebuilt. That's what would happen. I have no doubt about it. None. So all of these people saying that we have to super worry about Russia launching nukes and nuclear war and World War III are scaremongering because they don't want the US involved for various reasons. Either they are just really anti-war, or, like our friend Fuckface Carlson, just don't want to see Putin lose because Putin is what he wishes the United States was. I think it was Carlson that said Putin. Oh, was it Carlson? Was it? Well, who was it? Who said that? Let's bring that up real quick. So it was Putin never did woke or something like that. Never told. Putin never said something about white people. I don't know. What was the quote? Oh, it was a quote. Key to white survival, how Putin has morphed into a far-right thing. Not walking back anything on Putin. Putin says you're trying to make assault. Facts rushing your coin. Here it is. Tucker Carlson. Downplaying Russian Ukraine. Why do I hate Putin? What? Putin? Has Putin ever called me racist? That's what it was. It was Carlson. YouTube. Has Putin ever called me racist? Oh.
Complete lunacy. Democrats are accusing her of working for Vladimir Putin. So if you want to know what the Democratic Party actually believes, don't listen to what they say. Oh, we want empowered women of color who are also veterans. No, they don't.
But that's not what Democrats said. Democrats want people, they want women in their party, but just like any other political organization, they want people in their party that are powerful and think the way they do. Oh, this is The View? I don't care about The View. Okay, here we go. All right. Oh, look, Tucker Carlson again.
So much. Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Dogs. Has he?
Hold on, let's watch that again. Okay, let's watch that again.
Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist?
That's what it's about. That's all this is about. Has Putin ever called him racist? Gotta hate it.
They want people who support regime change war. That's their red line. That's the one thing they will brook no.
No. It's not about regime change war. The Democrats were against the Iraq war. Democrats were against other wars. They believe, though, that we have a moral obligation to stop things like genocide. They believe that we have a moral obligation to do things like get involved in a military assault or a military operation against people that are committing human rights abuses. They believe in, I don't have it on my desk, just war theory. And that's why they were for the Syria conflict. That's why they were for the Libyan conflict. It wasn't because it was regime change and a Democrat happened to be in charge. It was because they sincerely believed that both Libya and Syria were engaged in crimes against humanity. But Tucker Carlson doesn't want you to know about these nuances. No, he does not.
No dissent on whatsoever. They don't care what you think about that. They don't want to debate you on it. If you disagree or even ask questions, they go right to traitor. So today, Tulsi Gabbard did what is probably inevitable and probably has been since 2016. She left her own party, the Democratic Party.
Oh, look, the darkened photo again. Oh, Tucker Carlson, we all know it. We all know you don't want her in charge of the Republican Party. Look at that. Look at your darkened video. Look at that. Look at that shadow looking sad. Looking all dark. They put a filter on that. We already showed it to you.
Party. We don't have to guess as to why, because she explained it in some detail, and we ask you, please listen carefully to this because it's inspiring and interesting. And she did it on a new podcast called The Tulsi Gabbard Show. It launched today. Here she is.
We already listened to this, so let's go ahead and fast forward this. Blah, 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 blah. Tulsi Gabbard lying through her teeth. Woke politics. Blah, 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 blah.
Leaving the Democratic Party.
Blah, 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 blah.
So keep in mind, until today, this was a registered Democrat, an office holder, a standard bearer of the Democratic Party, the future of the Democratic Party from the country's most liberal state. This was a liberal Democrat. Did you hear that? Is there a single word you disagree with? Is there a single word that the Republican who represents you, who you send money to, who you vote for, would repeat in public? In other words, here you have someone who until yesterday was a member of the Democratic Party saying things the overwhelming majority of Republican voters believe, but only a vanishingly small minority of Republican office holders are willing to say out loud because it's too scary.
Hey, thanks for the follow. Not anonymous. Appreciate it. We're just watching some fucker Carlson over here. Watching about Tulsi Gabbard. Rewind if you want to hear about it, because we've said some jokes.
Oh, it just tells you so much. Subscribe to the fire.
No, not subscribing. Screw off. Don't care. So, Tucker Carlson likes populist right-wingers, and Tulsi Gabbard is now a populist right-winger, so he's fawning head over heels in love with Tulsi Gabbard. Okay. So, I actually have a video about that, not anonymous, where I explain my politics to a degree, but left liberal. Lib-left. Not a populist, conservative with some libertarian views, okay? You might find some things on this program you agree with, but if you are fully on board with the Trump train, probably not. So, given I'm not populist conservative, you might find some things to agree with. So I try to not, like, with people I'm interacting with, you know, I'll attack politicians and stuff, but with people I'm interacting with, I'm not going to go out and just, like, hammer people unless they give me some reason to. So if you are okay with people that you might like as a politician getting attacked on, then you'll probably stick around. So yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I used to consider myself a libertarian, and then I started hanging out with libertarians. So yeah, there's probably some views we agree with, although I am not for, I'm not an open borders type of libertarian. I believe that there is some validity to having controlled flows of immigration. That's why I don't consider myself a leftist. There's a lot of reasons I don't consider myself a leftist. That's one of them, and also foreign policy. But yeah, that's what we just got done with, though. We just got done talking about Tulsi Gabbard. Okay. Talked about Tulsi Gabbard a bit. And so, we're going to continue on. Cool. Not anonymous. Yeah, you might stick around. We'll talk about some stuff. We talked about immigration a little bit. We actually have a couple shows about immigration. So yeah, you might agree with what we have there. But we do have to continue on with the news roundup. So let's get into it. All right. So in this week's SCOTUS news, we learned... Oh, first of all, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Hope you enjoy it. Go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. Greatly appreciate that. And yeah, we're going to get into some SCOTUS news now. Let's go ahead and get into SCOTUS. So in this week's SCOTUS news, we learned that Justice Clarence Thomas was a huge Prince fan in the 80s. California prefers... Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My dog was growling behind me. I had to see what was going on. She's just playing though. She's getting a little play on. All right. Well, we're gonna start this little segment over. All right. In this week's SCOTUS news, we learned that Justice Clarence Thomas was a huge Prince fan in the 1980s. California prefers bacon that wasn't caged. Trump filed an appeal, and 2 death row inmates asked the court to intervene on their cases. So let's get into it, starting with Thomas being a Prince fan. So this is a little bit interesting and gives us some clarity about some of the arguments being made. So we're going to go over to TMZ, surprisingly, to talk about it. So.
Let's say that I'm both a Prince fan, which I was in the 80s, and...
no longer?
Well... So... only on Thursday night.
All right, a little bit of levity for this important topic. Thought it was funny. All right, well, let's continue on with it. This exchange happened during oral arguments in a case that could have far-reaching implications for copyright as they apply to fair use. The case involves the use of a 1981 image of the late musician Prince in a series of Andy Warhol silk screens. The Griot reports attorneys argued that the artist's painting, based on a 1981 photograph of Prince by Lynn Goldsmith, is transformative from the original work. In the wake of Prince's unexpected death in 2016, the musician's image was used and reused many times to commemorate and celebrate his iconic legacy. In one such tribute, Vanity Fair magazine republished a Warhol silk screen of Prince titled Orange Prince. Let's go ahead and look at this now here. Orange Prince. All right. Orange Prince image. So we're going to get this on screen real quick. All right. So this is the image in question. All right. Orange Prince. There we go. In one such tribute, Vanity Fair magazine republished Warhol's silk screen of Prince titled Orange Prince, which we just saw. The portrait, which depicts Prince's with a moody, smoky eye set against an orange background, was part of a series that Vanity Fair originally commissioned more than 30 years before. It's based on the photograph shown here. We'll bring that up now because it's... okay, bring that up. All right. Based on the photograph shown here, on the left by award-winning photographer Lynn Goldsmith of Vanity and Vanity Fair's Warhol silkscreen titled Orange Prince is on the right. So this is Prince, this is Orange Prince. In 1984, Vanity Fair, after paying Goldsmith $400 for its use and establishing a written agreement to use the image solely in that instance, sent Warhol the photograph as a reference. Since 2017, Goldsmith has been challenging the 2016 reuse of the image, claiming that it infringes upon her original copyright agreement. Warhol's Prince series is not little known. The silk screens have been displayed in various art exhibits and museums since their creation. The difference between those instances and this, according to court documents, is that the highly commercialized nature of them. Attorneys for the Warhol Foundation attempted to prove his work is transformative enough to be passed off as his own. They cited a 1994 court ruling in favor of the rap group Two Live Crew, parody of Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman. In Two Live Crew's parody, the message and meaning behind the rendition of the song was found to be new and inventive enough to pass off as its own. The fact that a parody has to resemble the original content enough in order to be a recognizable parody was also considered. Lisa Blatt, an attorney for Goldsmith, warned against using this defense for Warhol. Quote, "Copyrights will be the mercy of copycats," she said. Justice Elena Kagan gave a slight indication that Warhol's frame could work in his favor. Quote, "We know who Andy Warhol was and what he was doing and what his works have been taken to mean. And so it's easy to say that there's something important and new in what he did with this image," she said. Kagan added that if Warhol were a new young artist, this defense might not actually hold. A decision in the Warhol Foundation versus Lynn Goldsmith isn't expected until the summer of 2023. Continuing on. Alright, so continuing on with more SCOTUS updates, we return now to the SCOTUS blog for a recap of some of the cases that SCOTUS has covered so far. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Court today. Orders, 3 things happened at the Supreme Court today. Orders, 2 oral arguments, and DOJ filed its opposition to Trump in the Mar-a-Lago documents fight. Here is a quick explainer of all of the above. Grab your Negroni Spagliato with Prosecco in it, and let's go. The court released its orders list, which is basically a long list of the cases they grant or mostly deny from the hundreds of requests they received. No new grants today, a bunch of denials, including the case of Andre Thomas, who is a death row inmate in Texas who argued that he had ineffective assistance of counsel. Thomas was sentenced to death for the murder of his wife, their son, and her daughter. Thomas is Black. His wife was white. He was convicted by an all-white jury. 3 jurors, quote, expressed firm opposition to interracial marriage and procreation, but Thomas's counsel didn't object. The court declined to take the case over the dissents of Justice Sotomayor, joined by Justice Kagan and Jackson. Now to...
That's pretty egregious. How are you going to let... How... I get that the Constitution doesn't say anything about having the right to a good attorney and representation, but come on, that's egregious. That's really bad.
Now to oral argument. The first case today is about an animal welfare law out of California. It says in California, you can't sell uncooked pork products if the pig was raised, quote, in a cruel manner. Breeding pigs have to have 24 square feet of living space. And the issue is the vast majority of pork sold in California comes from pigs raised in other states like Iowa and North Carolina.
So this is California trying to uphold its own laws within the state and make it to where they can partly protect their own farmers and stuff like that from competition, but also California is fairly liberal and they care about animal rights and human rights and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so in this particular case, they're basically saying that, hey, if you don't follow our rules about what we would like to have sold in our stores, then you're not going to be able to sell them here. And this might run afoul of the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So let's continue watching now.
Industry groups in those states don't want to comply with California's animal welfare
standards,
that's why. And they argue that the law violates the Dormant Commerce Clause of the Constitution. That's the idea that the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce when states exchange goods and money, like pork. And that means that individual states can't pass laws that discriminate against interstate commerce. And the second case, a Texas inmate.
Yeah, so that's basically what I just said, and there's probably some validity to that. Yeah.
On death row, who maintains his innocence, wants DNA testing of the crime scene evidence that he thinks will clear him. The court has held that an inmate has the right to prove his innocence with new DNA evidence. But if his efforts to try and get that DNA testing don't work, he can make a federal civil rights claim as long as he can show that the state denied him his right to due process. So this case is a technical one about the statute of limitations to pursue that civil rights claim and whether the inmate here, Reed, missed the deadline.
There shouldn't be a statute of limitations when it comes to appealing death penalties.
And finally, the DOJ filed its opposition to Trump's request that the Supreme Court intervene in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents fight. Trump wants the special master to be able to review the classified documents. The DOJ does not. Notably,
the DOJ is correct on this.
As Amy points out, the Solicitor General in today's filing called Judge Eileen Cannon's order restricting the government's use of its own classified documents unprecedented.
Right. And that's the recap. But as of this afternoon, the SCOTUS has actually denied the appeal referenced in the SCOTUS blog's brief in order with no publicly noted dissents. In other words, they went through the quote-unquote shadow docket, and Trump's appeal for that case has been denied, summarily denied. So that's what we have there. And that concludes our little news bites about SCOTUS. So let's continue on, though, with some more news because we have a lot to cover and the night is kind of young still. So let's get into it. And let's get into it with some January 6th committee updates. So the House Special Committee formed to investigate the January 6, 2021 insurrection held a hearing today, revealing more information about the events of that day. It's not clear if this was the final hearing for the committee, though. The roundup will bring you future episodes that summarize the highlights of the committee's hearing in the next few weeks. The way that the hearing today ended was history in the making. Let's go ahead and watch some of that now. And in that, by some of it, we mean the entire end. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Person of the event of January 6th.
Let's rewind that because I'm sure it didn't play properly.
Person of the event of January 6th. So it is our obligation to seek Donald Trump's testimony. There's precedent in American history for Congress to compel the testimony of a president. There's also precedent for presidents to provide testimony, documentary evidence to congressional investigators.
This is talk about co-equal branches of government, checks and balances. The Congress can make a president show up to testify, potentially anyways. We'll see what the Supreme Court says about that. But this is not outside of the realm of norms or possibilities because Congress cannot enforce its authority upon a president or former president if it can't conduct investigations into their actions. And so that's where this comes into play.
We also recognize that a subpoena to a former president is a serious and extraordinary action. That's why we want to take this step in full view of the American people, especially because the subject matter at issue is so important to the American people and the stakes are so high for our future and our democracy. And so I recognize the Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, to offer a motion.
Now why they're doing this is essentially because of all of the testimony and hearings that they had during the hearings rather, and all the information that came out during those that lead them to believe that Trump was not only intimately involved with some of the people that charged the Capitol that day, but also was aware of that and actually encouraged some of it, or at least didn't discourage it enough or at all, essentially. And so that's why they're doing this. A lot of that information was revealed over the last few weeks, and especially around the lines of the hearing, the testimony of people that had either first or secondhand information about how he reacted when told that people were storming the Capitol. So, continuing on though, let's listen to Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, you will not be missed, but you at least actually cared about democracy to an extent. So, hey, good for you.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to today's notice, I send to the desk a committee resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Committee Resolution 1, resolved that the chairman be and is hereby directed to subpoena Donald J. Trump for documents and testimony in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol pursuant to Section 5C4 of House Resolution 503 and Clause 2M of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives.
The gentlewoman from Wyoming is recognized on her resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, our committee now has sufficient information to answer many of the critical questions posed by Congress at the outset. We have sufficient information to consider criminal referrals for multiple individuals and to recommend a range of legislative proposals to guard against another January 6th. But a key
now, these proposals that they're going to recommend are actually important. The likelihood of them passing after the midterm elections is 0. Because it's not likely Democrats are going to maintain control of the House. That's the only problem. And Liz Cheney will not be around at that time because she lost her primary in Wisconsin. Or it was Wisconsin? No, wait. Not Wisconsin. I'm stupid. Wyoming. The other W. Anyways, let's continue on.
Task remains. We must seek the testimony under oath of January 6th central player. More than 30.
Trump will plead the fifth if he's actually forced to do this, and there won't be anything. It'll just be like, fifth, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate myself. Fifth. That's all he's going to do. Nothing's going to happen. And then he'll go and grandstand afterwards, which is the only thing that his supporters are going to watch, and talk about how he like took on the woke Democrats and their rhino compatriots that hate America, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I don't expect anything to actually come from this, but it needs to happen.
30 witnesses in our investigation have invoked their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And several of those did so specifically in response to questions about their dealings with Donald Trump directly. Here are a few examples. This is Roger Stone with Oath Keepers at the Willard Hotel on the morning of January 6th.
Now, for those that may not know, Oath Keepers is a paramilitary organization that says they will defend the United States from both enemies, foreign and domestic, as well as take on tyranny within the United States. Essentially, they came about because of Obama's win in 2008, and so that should tell you about everything that they actually care about and their organization. I actually found them when they were just beginning and got to know a few of them in their forums. I can't prove any of this, of course, because those forums have since been deleted. But yeah, they're exactly what they've been exposed to be here, and they've always been this way. They're not actually protecting the United States from tyranny. They only want to protect it from essentially, liberals. Protect, quote unquote.
And here is Mr. Stone testifying before our committee.
Did you speak to President Trump on his private cell phone on either January 5th or January 6th?
Now,
once again, on advice of counsel, I will assert my Fifth Amendment right to respectfully decline to answer your question.
Now, here's one thing that should be mentioned here. The way the committee is going about revealing this evidence in these closing statements is the way that everybody should reveal evidence any time. I put it up on Twitter on the crowdsourced poll. Go ahead and check out the Twitter if you have not done so before. I like to post a lot of stuff there. That if the media reveals anything that has been a lie, they need to open up with the truth first and then show the lie. For two reasons. One, nobody watches the full videos of anything anymore. Doesn't matter if it's a 60-second, 30-second video or a 2-hour-long video. People only watch until their attention span gets blah, and then they go on about their day. So you need to have their attention, when you have their attention rather, which is during the first, minute or two of a video, to state the facts, or at least state the facts, right? And then you can expose the lie. You say, hey, they lied. Here's the fact. Here's the lie. Here's the fact. You do a truth sandwich. You do the lie sandwich. You sandwich the lie between the truth, and that will make it stickier. Second issue is that even if people watch the full video on anything, they are less likely to pick up on the truth if you lead with a lie, because first impressions are everything. And so when you lead with the lie, you're making the lie stickier because of that. You make them second guess the truth because they're like, well, I just heard this, and it's just the way human brains work. So what they're doing here, by opening with the truth and then showing what the lie is, they are actually doing the correct way to actually convince people that what has happened has happened. Let's continue on.
This is General Michael Flynn walking with Oath Keepers on December 12th, 2020. And here is General Flynn's testimony before our committee.
Increase the speed here.
Did you, General Flynn, talk to President Trump at any point on January 6, 2021?
Here is John Eastman, fraudulently instructing tens of thousands of angry protesters that the vice president could change the election outcome on January 6th. Later on this same day, Dr. Eastman acknowledged in writing that Donald Trump knew what he was attempting was illegal. Here is John Eastman testifying before our committee.
Did President Trump authorize you to discuss publicly your January 4th, 2021 conversation with him?
Fifth.
So is it your position that you can discuss in the media direct conversations you had with the President of the United States, but you will not discuss those same conversations with this committee?
Fifth.
Here is Jeff Clark, who conspired with Donald Trump to corrupt the Department of Justice. President Trump wanted to appoint Jeff Clark as acting Attorney General. And as you can see in this call log we obtained from the National Archives, he did so. And here is Mr. Clark testifying before our committee.
Mr. Clark, when did you first talk directly with President Trump?
5th.
Mr. Clark, did you discuss with President Trump allegations of fraud in the 2020 election?
5th.
So invoking your Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself is not necessarily an admission of guilt. In these instances, though, it is. And that's why they're showing the truth first.
Other witnesses have also gone to enormous lengths to avoid testifying about their dealings with Donald Trump. Steve Bannon has been tried and convicted by a jury of his peers for contempt of Congress. He is scheduled to be sentenced for this crime later this month. Criminal proceedings regarding Peter Navarro continue. And Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, has refused to testify based upon executive privilege. The committee's litigation with him continues. Mr. Chairman.
There is no executive privilege here. No nonsense. That's a good joke. I'll put that up there. So, no nonsense says he's quite the drinker, always asking for a fifth. Lol.
Chairman, at some point, the Department of Justice may well unearth facts that these and other witnesses are currently concealing. But our duty today is to our country and our children and our Constitution. We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion. And every American is entitled to those answers, so we can act now to protect our republic. So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
All right, so that is the motion that Liz Cheney and the January 6th heard today at the end of their hearings, and they unanimously approved that resolution. Unanimously. So we will keep you posted with these updates as they occur. One thing that should be noted here is that Trump's next goal in this is to delay, and hopefully he can delay it until after the midterm election. Well, not after it, because that's likely to happen regardless, but until after the new Congress is seated. Because once the new Congress is seated, none of this goes forward. They're going to do, this committee is going to do everything in its power in order to make that happen prior to the seating of the new Congress. But do not be surprised if this does not get actually brought to the light of day. More so than it already has been, in other words. But we have some more updates about Trump's legal issues as well. So we're going to talk about that now. We typically avoid reporting on the former president, but now it seems like a good time to bring everyone up to date on the most pressing legal issues he faces at the moment, in addition to the committee hearing here. Here's the latest on the evidence piling up against the former president in the DOJ investigation that led to the execution of a search warrant on March 8th, as reported by the Washington Post. A Trump employee has told federal agents about moving boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago at the specific direction of the former president, according to people familiar with the investigation. The former president has previously maintained that he has not involved in the packing and moving of boxes, that NARA, the National Archives records, spent more than a year trying to retrieve. Sources say the witness account, combined with security camera footage, offers key evidence of Donald Trump's behavior as investigators sought the return of these classified materials. The witness description and footage described to the Washington Post offer the most direct account to date of Trump's actions and instructions leading up to the FBI search, in which agents were looking for evidence of potential crimes, including obstruction of justice, destruction of government records, and or mishandling of classified information. Experts who quickly weighed in on the reporting of developments as well. Former federal prosecutor Renetto, former federal prosecutor Renetto Mariotti noted in a Twitter thread, quote, "During the employee's first interview, he lied to the FBI, denying handling of that information. His stories changed during the second interview. The employee is unlikely to be charged if he continues to cooperate. But his testimony suggests that Trump tried to keep documents from the DOJ, which has already served a grand jury subpoena for the documents, before the employee was ordered to move them, Marinati said. This testimony, combined with other facts, such as the false certification to the DOJ, suggests an effort to hide the documents from the federal government. This evidence is an aggravating factor that could weigh in favor of charging Trump. Former Mueller prosecutor Andrew Weissman also said, quote, "Between this and the testimony of Trump's lawyer, Alex Cannon, and that he refused to sign a statement swearing that all government documents in Trump's possession had returned to NARA, Trump's Mar-a-Lago's goose is cooked. As I have often said, the issue is no longer the proof, but DOJ's will." Now, the reason this is the case is because if the lawyer had signed that all evidence had been turned over, and that was wrong, and knowingly was wrong, they would be disbarred and prevented from practicing law and also be charged with a federal crime. So that's why they refused to sign that and why this testimony is important. Continuing on, Harvard Law's Lawrence Tribe also wrote, "Day by day, the evidence that proves Trump's personally orchestrated the theft and concealment of top secret documents becomes stronger. Any shadow of doubt about his guilt is rapidly vanishing." The BBC reported that among other statutes, the Justice Department believes Trump may have violated the Espionage Act by keeping national security information that could be used to injure the United States. In addition to charges relating to the classified documents themselves, prosecutors are also looking at obstruction of justice as another potential crime. A special master was appointed this month to determine what, if any, of the approximate 11,000 non-classified documents are protected by attorney-client privilege. The review, though, is ongoing. And this does not stop here. There's also investigations into civil and criminal cases of the Trump Organization and Trump in New York. So BBC News reported on the New York civil and criminal cases as well. Prosecutors in New York are examining Trump's organization, the former president's family company. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, is leading the criminal investigation and has spent almost 3 years looking at whether the company committed various acts of fraud over several decades in the state. These include allegedly overstating the value of real estate, such as golf courses and hotels, in order to get more favorable loans and better tax rates. This would be classic fraud. The years-long criminal investigation is led by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who is looking into the same issues as they relate to operations in New York City. James filed a fraud lawsuit in September that could, in theory, lead to the Trump Organization ceasing to exist in its current form. James said the former president, his 3 eldest children, and 2 company executives committed numerous acts of fraud between 2011 and 2021. The lawsuit alleges that the family inflated their net worth by billions of dollars and is seeking $250 million that was allegedly obtained through fraudulent means, i.e. using their assets as collateral that they overinflated knowingly so. There's some wiggle room when it comes to like branding rights and that sort of stuff, but when your accountant's like, you can't do this and you do it anyways, you're in trouble. It's also seeking various penalties, such as bans on Trump and his children from serving in a leadership role in any New York business. Bragg's criminal investigation has been quieter so far. Ms. James has also referred her findings to federal prosecutors, which could lead to a new criminal investigation being opened. There's also criminal investigation going on in Georgia. So prosecutors in Georgia are looking into alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. The criminal investigation was opened after the disclosure of an hour-long phone call between the former president and the state's top election official on January 2nd of 2021. Quote, "I just want to find 11,780 votes," Mr. Trump said during the call to Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a reference to the number of ballots needed to give him victory in the swing state. These allegations are very serious. If indicted and convicted, people are facing prison sentences, Ms. Willis told the Washington Post last month. She added the decision on indictments was not imminent, but said Trump could soon be called to give testimony. It is not yet known whether the former president is being directly investigated, but some of his allies are known to be part of the inquiry. One target is his former personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who led legal challenges to dispute the election results. Lawyers for Mr. Giuliani have said that he did not commit wrongdoing in the state, which, of course, they said that, but we all have the evidence so far. You think about it. It reported that investigators are examining potential criminal wrongdoing in calls made to Georgia officials, as well as alleged false statements made to politicians there in the state. For a criminal conviction, however, prosecutors would ultimately need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that those involved knew their actions were fraudulent. And finally, we have a defamation lawsuit about alleged rape. Trump lashed out angrily on Wednesday, calling the U.S. legal system a broken disgrace after a judge ruled he must answer questions under oath next week in a defamation lawsuit lodged by a writer who says he raped her. He also called the 2019 lawsuit by E. Jane Carroll, a longtime advice columnist for Elle magazine, a hoax and a lie. The outburst came hours after a U.S. District Judge in Manhattan, Louis A. Kaplan, rejected a request by Trump's lawyers to delay a deposition scheduled for October 19th. Carroll says Trump raped her in the dressing room of a Manhattan Bertha Goodman store in mid-1990. He called the lawsuit a complete con job. Quote, "I don't know this woman, have no idea who she is, other than it seems she got a picture of me many years ago with her husband shaking my hand on a reception line at a celebrity charity event," Trump said. She completely made up a story that I met her at the doors of the crowded New York City department store and within minutes swooned her. It is a hoax, a lie, just like all the other hoaxes that have been played on me for these past 7 years. Now all I have to do is go through years more of legal nonsense in order to clear my name of her and her lawyer's phony attacks on me. This can only happen to Trump. So Trump's been credibly accused, credibly so, by dozens of women since before actually running for president. I think this woman actually talked about it prior to. And yeah, this isn't good. I mean, you know, he did have the "you can do anything you want if you're famous" line, right? So why should we believe that he didn't try to move on somebody like he said he would? Just saying. Behind every bravado or every claim of sexual prowess, there's either at least the desire of it or a little bit of truth. And with Trump, it's probably both. Carroll is actually scheduled to be deposed tomorrow. Robert Kaplan, Carroll's attorney, said she looked forward to filing new claims next month and is moving forward to trial with all dispatch after New York State passed the Adult Survivors Act, which allows Carroll to sue for damages for the alleged rape without the statute of limitation blocking it, which is good. This is a good thing. Allows victims to at least get some redress about the things they've suffered from, and more states should follow suit of eliminating the statute of limitations on these things. And with criminal investigations, you have to prove in a court of law that you did something, and so that's a protection against any, God forbid, wrongful allegations. Wrongful allegations almost never happen. So there's that too. That concludes what's going on with Trump. Speaking of Trump and Trump allies, Alex Jones's second trial ends. Let's talk about this because this is one for the ages. A little bit of palate cleanser from what we just heard too. So Alex Jones laughed on air that nearly $1 billion in damages a Connecticut jury ordered him to pay to Sandy Hook victims, jokingly that the plaintiff won't see that money. Business Insider reported that Jones said, quote, "Do these people actually think they're getting any of this money?" he said, according to NBC News reporter Radri Zardanzi. But Jones could be in for a rude awakening. Ron Austin, a New Orleans-based civil attorney, told Insider that if Jones tries to dodge payment, the plaintiffs can go after everything he's got. Plaintiffs could then start looking for what assets he might have, looking at whether he's fraudulently transferred any of those assets. They'll start going after those too as well. They start piercing the corporate veil to get him personally. Essentially, you start seizing everything he owns. Austin said that courts do afford debtors the ability to have an abode and reasonable living expenses, though. Those kinds of decisions will ultimately be determined by a judge, he said. But Jones won't likely have the same standard of living as before, such as a large debt weighing on his shoulders. Quote, "This guy had made millions and millions. I don't think he will maintain that same lifestyle," he said. The conscience of the community spoke loudly and indicated that the behavior will not be tolerated, and it sent a message to those who seek to profit on lies and deceit, and it's not going to be tolerated, as Austin added. For years, Jones published a lie that the 2012 shooting was staged by the government as pretext for restricting gun rights. The Connecticut trial was the second of 3 similar cases that Jones lost by default when he refused to turn over financial records about his company. The first trial wrapped up in Texas in August, with a jury determining that Jones should pay the parents of the victim Jesse Lewis nearly $50 million. A third case, also in Texas, has not yet been scheduled, and we'll keep you posted when those happen. Crack the back. How's everybody doing tonight? Good? We all good? Good that we're happy that Jones, what happened with Jones? I'm happy with what happened to Jones. There's memes for this. Some good ones too. We got this one. We got this one over here. Look at that. That's funny. InfoWars becoming spirit of Halloween. Yeah. Anyways, good fun. All right. Now we have to report on the economy and labor as we usually do. Let's get into it. A closely watched, so we're going to talk about it. I'm going to pontificate. We're going to have a not a good time with this one, but it's important information that everybody needs to be aware of because things are happening globally that may be outside of anyone's control. But what you can control is how you react to these things. And if you know what's going on, you can hopefully protect yourself to a degree. That's why we're going to talk about it. A closely watched measure of U.S. consumer prices rose by more than forecast to a 40-year high in September, Market Insider reported today. The core consumer price index, which excludes food and energy, increased by 6.6% from a year ago, the highest level since 1982, Labor Department data showed. From a month earlier, the core CPI climbed 0.6% for a second month. The overall CPI increased by 0.4% last month and was up 8.2% from a year earlier. The advance was broad-based, which means it had a basket of goods included. Shelter, food, and medical care indexes were the largest of many contributors, the report said. Prices for gasoline and used cars, though, declined. And on the heels of a second jobs report last week, the inflation data likely cements an additional 75 basis points or 0.75% interest rate hike at Fed's November policy meeting. This spurred speculation for a 5th straight increase of that size in December, which is what the Fed essentially said they were going to do. This is all as foretold. But it's important to know here that top line inflation is actually down from a year earlier. However, the core CPI index climbing means that we're not done with inflation yet. And in fact, the Fed's tightening is not actually seeming to work as well as hoped. Now, we're still seeing prices to a degree come down. It came down 0.1%, so it's a little bit of disinflation. The disinflation, I believe, is happening because it's not going up nearly as much. But we're not seeing deflation, which is what the Federal Reserve is hoping for. Or the Federal Reserve is hoping for massive disinflation, which is the slowing of inflation. So like an immense slowdown. We're seeing that to a degree. They're hoping for a little bit of deflation to get back to the 2% range, but we're not seeing that. And that's not good. That's not good. And it's not good because it means that the Federal Reserve is likely to continue tightening and get more aggressive with its tightening than what it previously said. Because job growth is still good. Job growth is always an indicator of what the Fed might do next. Over the past 2 months, job growth fell to its lowest pace since January of 2021, granting the Fed a sigh of relief over a labor market that is still strong, but no longer white hot. Coincidentally, last Friday's report has showed that the wage growth over the past 2 months fell to the lowest level in 18 months. This is evidence of easing tightness in the labor market and should alleviate some of the Fed's concerns about inflationary pressure. The Fed is taking direct aim at the labor market because it doesn't want wage price inflation spiral. In other words, they think if you kick enough people out of their jobs, you're going to have disinflation, because that means less people buying things because, they're about to be homeless. None of this stuff has to happen. This is just the Fed being the Fed, and people with assets wanting to protect assets and all that. We're gonna talk a lot about it. Let's continue on. So, to reiterate, the Fed is taking direct aim at the labor market with its rate hikes and anticipates unemployment rising from 3.7% currently to 4.4% next year. In other words, millions of people become unemployed. Traders have also priced a higher peak Fed rate for next year. Policymakers have responded with the most aggressive tightening campaign since 1980, but so far, the labor market and consumer demand have remained resilient. This means that people are still spending money despite the fact that inflation is high. So that means adjusted for inflation, people are still spending a lot of money. Recently, Federal Reserve Vice Chair Lael Brainard suggests she wants slow down rate hikes and find a rate that will gradually bring inflation back to the Fed's target of 2%. Brainard noted that, quote, "It will take time for the full effects of tighter financial conditions to work through different sectors and to bring down inflation," alluding to a possible slowdown of rate hikes to allow the Fed's previous tightening to take effect first. It's critical to note here that on average, it takes 12 to 18 months for rate increases to affect the economy. And that's because prior to the rate increases, you had people washed with funds, and they are able to borrow money at lower rates during that ramp up. And then it takes a while for that borrowed money to circulate through the economy, and people to need to borrow more money, and then to hit the rates where they don't want to borrow that anymore. Disinflation is something that we do need, but the Fed does not have the tools to fight this kind of inflation that we have. And I've been saying this for months. So over on the news roundup, you can find a short video we published where I said, hey, you'll start to see prices slow in their increases around July, August timeframe. We saw that, right? And at the same time, I've been saying that the Fed could potentially tighten rates into stagflation. And the reason that I say that is because the primary drivers for inflation are things the Fed doesn't control: energy, rent, medical care, and education. Those four things: energy, medical care, rent and housing combined, and education, have somewhat inelastic demand. Everybody needs to be housed, because if you don't have a house, you don't have any stability. So people can only play with the rates of rents and mortgages and stuff such so much. They can only cut back on that so much. There isn't a lot of housing coming onto the market, because a lot of it that was built over between 2018 to 2021 has been bought already, either by investors that had cheap money or a lot of money on hand and wanting to turn them into rental properties, because everybody knows that we're in a demographic boom right now. We're in a demographic bubble with people, millennials and Zoomers, each entering into prime family formation ages. Zoomers are behind millennials, obviously, because they were born in 1999, 2000 time frame. So you're looking at, 20, 22-year-olds as the oldest, with the youngest millennial, though, being around 24 years old. The youngest millennial being 24 years old. The oldest millennial being in their early 40s. the majority of millennials being in their early to mid 30s. What happens in your early to mid 30s in today's age? Family formation. Everything got delayed because of the Great Recession. And so that pushed everything back. And it wasn't until the pandemic, really, that millennials had enough footing as a whole to get into the housing market. And when the pandemic hit, it put everybody on that forward. It brought them to the present, to the then present, to 2020, because people needed more space to work. And they needed more space because some people were actually having babies. There wasn't a baby boom because of it, don't get me wrong, but they were having kids and they were getting married and everything like that, stuff, standard stuff. And when the pandemic hit, interest rates dropped to a degree, so people jumped on board with that. I was one of those. I jumped on board with that. I was always going to move into the house that I moved in, or move into a house around 2020, because that's when I was financially secure enough to do so. But with things as what they were, I saw a lot of people like, man, I rent right now. And this was before the pandemic took full effect. Like, I rent right now, and I got to move into a house. Like, I'm feeling good about my financial security. Not everybody that I knew had this, but a lot of people did. And that's what we're experiencing. And the Federal Reserve can't build housing. They can only give cheap money to have housing built. But that cheap money also can diminish the supply of housing by giving it to investors to buy up that stock. So this blunt instrument the Federal Reserve has with tightening rates can both decrease the amount of supply on the market, which means that there's less ability for people to buy because there's less being built, and make it more expensive for the supply of housing on the market to be bought. So they can't do anything about that. Then you have energy. Energy is a global commodity, especially liquefied natural gas. The war in Ukraine kicks off. That takes out a large sector of the energy economy. A lot of that is going towards the war, and another bit of it is being taken off the market due to Putin's sanctions. I mean, it's still on the market, but it's getting more expensive because war, right? War, panic buying, etc. That's always happens when there's a major war. It happened when the US invaded Iraq. And then you have geopolitical situations where Saudi Arabia is trying to keep a barrel of oil around $90 a barrel in order to modernize its economy to become less reliant on a petrostate by investing billions of dollars into not only soft power with things like the LGV Tour. I don't remember what it stands for, but that new golf tournament that they're hosting. But they're also using billions of dollars to attract top talent CEOs to move into the companies that they're just building out in the middle of the desert. And if they don't have oil at 90 a barrel, then they can't do these things. Right? And $90 a barrel is the sweet spot because it makes it profitable enough for them to continue on their path of this modernization of this, basically buy anything that I can to modernize, to make my way in the world, to get less reliant on oil, because oil is going to go away. Oil is not going to go away completely, but the amount of oil used is going to diminish a lot with the electric car revolution that we're in right now. We are in it. It is happening. Okay. It's going to reduce the cost of transportation immensely. We're not like in the throes of it. We're not in the thick of that, but we entered it and we're in it. And it's just going to, the cost of manufacturing batteries is just going to go down. The cost of getting materials is just going to go down. More materials and different batteries are going to be found. And there's going to be less demand for oil because of that. So they see the writing on the wall. Wall Street sees the writing on the wall too. Wall Street with ESG and other things are in the midst of picking apart, American oil companies to get as much profit out of them as possible, telling them not to invest in exploration and instead give money back to shareholders. So the Federal Reserve, by making things more expensive, by tightening rates, is also inadvertently making it more expensive on energy, because energy is extremely capital intensive in order to get additional energy. Extremely. It doesn't matter what source of energy it is. It takes billions of dollars to get new energy sources. Even with the shale revolution, it takes billions of dollars, hundreds of millions for shale. Hundreds of millions. And when you make it more expensive to borrow, that reduces the margin. And because everybody's addicted to profit, you're making it harder to get energy. That's 2. Food. The federal government can't grow food. Well, the Federal Reserve, rather. Federal government could. Federal Reserve can't grow food. Farming is another capital-intensive occupation, especially industrialized farming. By increasing rates, it's increasing the cost of farming because buying new equipment, repairing equipment is expensive. And if you increase the cost of borrowing, which is what the Fed can only decrease and increase the cost of borrowing, then you're going to lead to additional cost within the food production capacity. So the Federal Reserve is making it more expensive to do that. Then the war in Ukraine took potentially, not fully, took potentially 20% off of the global market for food. We live in a global economy. And we live in a capitalistic global economy, which means people are going to try to find the best that they can, the best price they can for the food that they grow. That includes people in the United States. So while we have an abundance of food, a lot more of that's going to be directed to export because it's going to be more profitable for them to export it. Droughts. Fed can't control the weather, so we have droughts across the entire world, further reducing the world's global food supply, especially in places like Ethiopia, India, the Middle East. These are places that are experiencing drought. The United States experienced drought too, reducing our yields in the United States. And so that's increasing food prices. Medical care always goes up because people live longer. As people live longer, they get more expensive healthcare. We have a huge population of elder boomers, and they're just getting older, and they're not getting healthier. So that's going to increase the cost of healthcare overall. Even if young people didn't use any healthcare whatsoever, the overall cost of the health on our healthcare system, simply due to our aging population, is going to continue to increase. And it's increasing now, especially with COVID. Because make no mistake, COVID isn't exactly over. We have a vaccine, it's working, it's doing a good job. But people are still getting COVID, still dying from COVID, and still experiencing long COVID. That's another hit on it. In education. How do people go to college? How do people get educated? How do people get training in job skills? Debt. The United States does not pay for these things. And so if it gets more expensive to borrow money, it becomes more expensive to get training and skills, and therefore increases that cost. So the federal government, the Federal Reserve rather, is doing things that are increasing the cost of things that it doesn't necessarily track. The core CPI doesn't track. The only thing it tracks out of that is medical, education, energy, housing, and food, not tracked. And those things are what's driving inflation right now. And they're going to continue to drive inflation because these are things that we're experiencing the most constrained of supply right now. And our economy is built on those 3 things: housing, energy, and food. Those 3 things go up, everything else falls. And by making it more expensive to generate those things, and with governments around the world instituting austerity when it comes to Britain, instituting austerity when it comes to the United States, because even if you don't increase taxes, if you decrease the amount of money flowing into the economy, which is what we're doing with the removal of the child tax credit or the child support tax credit that happened, removing of the removing of the payments that happened during the pandemic, that is by all effects, an austerity measure. And so the government is taking away money. Federal Reserve is taking away money. Federal Reserve is exporting a ton of inflation globally, slowing down the economy globally, because as the Federal Reserve increases rates, in the United States, it forces every other country to also do so. And the reason it forces every country to do so is because the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. A lot of countries have dollar denominated debt, which means they have to get dollars in order to pay that debt. And that when the Federal Reserve raises its rates, it makes it more expensive to use your current currency to pay those debts, because that makes the dollar stronger and the other currency weaker. And to combat that, they have to raise rates themselves, slowing their own economies down. So the Federal Reserve and the global community is involved in a tightening rush to bring down inflation that is caused primarily by things that are completely out of the control of any central banker, and making matters worse. They are tightening rates into stagflation. What is stagflation? Well, to make a long story short, stagflation is a recession with, or anemic growth, or a recession with inflation. And because of those four things that we mentioned repeatedly on this program, the things that are impacting everybody, increasing in cost, that can't be reduced in cost by demand destruction, because it only has so much inelasticity. There's only so much elastic demand on those things. And their supply is extremely constrained across the board, because the planet's just getting more people. Food is becoming a bit more scarce due to global warming, due to war. Housing is more scarce in the United States due to people looking for housing and investors buying it up to serve as rental properties, and buying and building and always chasing, always chasing bigger and bigger margins instead of going for a profit that isn't as large, which they could do by building smaller homes. But they're not going to do that. Japan hasn't avoided inflation. Japan has not. Japan has inflation. It doesn't have as much inflation. Same thing with South Korea, and the reasons for that is because they're super savers. Part of the reason for that. So I was on a roll there. So let me, before I get to that comment fully, these are things that basically the Federal Reserve, central banks around the world, can't do anything to increase the supply, but governments can. And if governments want to do that, they're going to have to let go of some austerity. And I don't think that anybody's in that right now. So Thomas D wants to know why Japan has avoided inflation. So Japan has avoided inflation partly due to its fact that it's a super saver country. It also has partly avoided inflation by its a massive amount of automation. It's being able to produce the same goods and services with less people and export those to the world. And that actually helps with inflation costs, because they don't have as much as high of a need as for labor. They have a labor shortage because they have a people shortage, but because of the automation and other things like that, and the fact that their people save and they do weird things like such as like tearing down houses to build new ones every 10 years or so. They do this. I can't speak onto your other comment about, and it's not letting me pull it up. Okay, there it is. About has provided allowances for temporary price increases. I don't know what you mean by that. If they've given people money for temporary price increases, for that, that's fine. But they can't fight. They're not avoiding inflation. Energy is expensive. Their housing is not as expensive because they have less people, but their food is getting more expensive because they're an island and food globally is getting expensive, etc. So like they haven't avoided inflation entirely. Let me look it up too. I'll look it up for Japan. Japan hasn't had hyperinflation because MMT to a certain extent is real. It's 250% of GDP is debt in Japan roughly. So inflation isn't necessarily a monetary problem, which is what I've been saying the whole time. But Japan's inflation rate 2022. Let's see. Yeah, Japan's experiencing inflation. It's January 0.5%, 2.4%, 3.2% by the end of the year quarter. and avoiding inflation. But yeah, I'll definitely, why is inflation so low in Japan? So WE Forum. I don't know what WE Forum is. World Economic? Okay. Inflation of 3%, something many of us would be dreaming right now. Its inflation stood at the level in August, putting it far below readings its fellow G7 members. So why is Japan different? Two factors maybe behind Japan's first involve certain state controls that can limit price rises. Ah, I see. That's what you mean. Okay. So Japan, yes, Japan is doing some price control mechanisms. Rises. Gas and electricity regulations dictate that price rises can only happen gradually. This means utility companies tend to secure long-term supply contracts, which in turn stabilize energy costs. Okay, so that's one reason. So they actually have it. And then the situation is similar. The situation with wheat is similar. Japan imports most of its wheat through a government organization that fixes resale prices for 6 months at a time. This helped the country avoid the worst impacts of rising wheat prices following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And then Japan recovered quickly during the pandemic and was one of the first countries to do so due to its lockdown measures. So that seems to be why. And then, as I said, Japan's super savers. So Japan's like one of the highest savers in the country. But I'd like to read up more about this, so I greatly appreciate you pointing that out. So we'll cover that probably on our Saturday show. Yeah, they actually have negative rates, or they did have negative rates there for a bit. So they were actually charging people money to to save. Right now they're at negative 0.2. So, oh no, that's consumer price index. Never mind. I'm not looking at the interest rates. All advanced economies, 80% of emerging markets, developing countries affected, according to the World Bank, but not every country is battling raising inflation. Zimbabwe, a range of measures has helped bring inflation down from more than 24% to 9.7. Inflation is also low in Switzerland, about 3.5. Switzerland generated more than 60% of its own electrical needs. Yeah. So yeah. But as I was saying, the Federal Reserve is making it more expensive to do pretty much everything, and that is negatively contributing to inflation across the board, and it's being exported to other countries. Now, I did just say our Saturday show. So on Saturdays, we are doing a show with Tiberius D. Again, friend of the show. It's probably how some of y'all met me. But we're doing these deep dive into economics and world policy. This is like heavy policy discussion stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you can only get usually on like NPR or like Ezra Klein show or what have you. And we're bringing it to Twitch. Okay. We know what you want. You want that deep policy nitty gritty with some edge, and that's what we're doing. And we're going to be talking about all this on Saturday, more so than what I covered here. So if you want to catch that, you can catch that over. I'll be streaming it on the channel here, at least on Twitch. So we'll be streaming that at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. And Tiberius will produce the show and put it up for everybody's enjoyment shortly thereafter. I'm not sure how much longer it takes him to edit that show, but once he edits it, it'll become a full-fledged podcast episode. Incredibly smart people are on that show. I am not one of them when it comes to this show. I am probably one of the least knowledgeable people that will be on that show, and that just shows you the caliber of people that are on there. So please check that out this Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be a good show. It's in general a good show. Call it The Conversations with Tiberius D. On here we'll call it the Crowdsourced Conversations or something of that nature, and we'll be posting it up on our YouTube as well. But that concludes our talk about inflation, about the economy, about jobs, and everything the Fed is doing with their rates. So we are actually about to wrap up the news roundup, and for those that may not know, the way that we like to end our news roundups is with a couple of stories that we're calling in a segment News of the Weird. And in tonight's News of the Weird, we're going to start with a story that's like, ugh, that's disgusting, and aw, that's cute. So we're going to come at you with some ewness first. So the terms emergency and AAA battery are typically connote a roadside incident. Certain doctors in Dublin, however, are unlikely to ever associate those terms with anything but a recent surgery. during which they found dozens of batteries in a 66-year-old woman's colon and stomach. Doctors initially decided to wait in hopes that she would pass the batteries out of her body naturally. And of course, we have images for you about this. Not any disgusting images that's going to get us banned, but an x-ray, all right? That is a crap ton of batteries in this woman. Like, look at this. This is, how? How do you have so many batteries? Like, is it pica? What the fuck? Now, though she released 5 AA batteries in the first week, subsequent x-rays showed that more was still stuck inside her, and the woman began experiencing abdominal pain. After realizing that her descended stomach was hanging above the pelvic bone due to the weight of the batteries, surgeons cut into her abdomen and successfully removed 46 more batteries. Unfortunately for everyone involved, 4 additional batteries remained trapped in her colon. And this is a little bit of trigger warning stuff for you, so turn off your ears now if you don't like body functions, but we're going to talk about it. As described in the recent reports, doctors milked them from her rectum to remove them from her anus. This brought the total amount of batteries she ingested, both AA and AAA, to a whopping 55. And this is the batteries after they've been removed. They started to deteriorate in her stomach acid. She's lucky she's still alive. Like, look at this. That's burned. These are burned batteries. She's got to have battery acid still in her body. Like, that's gross. That's gross. Ew. Ew, 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 ew. Now, a little bit of, oh, that's so cute. All right. So, oh, that's so cute. So, a cat proved she wasn't missing after all. Her return surprised her people. Stephanie Whitley, a Long Island woman who owns an 8-year-old cat, Lily, said her beloved feline went missing roughly 2 weeks after a recent move to Mastic Beach. Whitley said that she was worried that Lily, who enjoys being outdoors and exploring, would react differently to her new home. Her suspicions were on the nose, but despite being gone for 4 days, Lily Laird proved to her family she wasn't going to leave them after all. Whitley said that she and her family were startled when the doorbell rang one night. A Ring doorbell notification appeared on their TV, and it revealed Lily had returned to their doorstep. Let's watch that video now. Bing bong! Oh. It's like the cat knew. Let me in! Let me in! Alright, that's enough of that. They all gasped and were laughing and were emotional. We're crying. It was just a great moment, Whitley said. And that concludes our weekly news roundup. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We're so glad you were able to join us tonight, and because without you, why would we be doing this? I like to hear myself talk, but not nearly that much. So thank you everybody for joining the program tonight. Shout out to our Facebook community who provides a lot of these articles for you, and special shout out to our copy producer, Nikki Adams, who without her, this would not be possible, as this copy is just fantastic. She does a great job and helps us really bring you the news home, and helps immensely in that regard. Writing copy, finding news stories that are interesting and are important for the community. As we said, we also do a few other podcasts. Those include Cypher State, which is now a weekly podcast that we've streamed live to Twitch and YouTube that cover geopolitical issues. Once a month, typically at the end of the month, starting here this month, we will also do a international news roundup similar to this program, but for international affairs. And we also do a deep dive into particular geopolitical issues. This week, we will be talking about Iran. We also have another podcast called Praxis Run, and Praxis Run is a podcast dedicated to understanding how and why people put praxis into action, otherwise known as praxis, with the hopes of tamping down on some vitriol and building political bridges. We also run various communities. You can join our Discord community where we'll be having contests and the like. Please do so. You can also hit us up on Twitter, and Twitter is actually where we'll be holding the contest this year for the midterm roundup. And by that, oh, I forgot to mention this earlier. We will be having a contest, and we're going to post it on Twitter. That contest is simultaneously. We would award a trophy to each winner of the people that can guess the makeup of the House and the Senate. The closest person that gets there without going over will be declared the winner. And we will have key races being measured and having a live discussion about it on that Tuesday when the election happens. So go ahead and check that out. But to be involved in that, you're going to have to go over to Twitter and give us your guesses or your predictions. So please do so. We also do, as we said, we run a Facebook group. You can find that Facebook group at Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons. And as we say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.